Greetings. Welcome to the June 2015 ACIP meeting. And we're going to turn things on over to our acting Executive Secretary, Dr. Cindy Weinbaum.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 2015 ACIP meeting. The proceedings of this meeting will be accessible to people who are not in attendance via the World Wide Web. We'd also like to welcome those who cannot attend the ACIP meeting in person. There are several people who are going to be with us for the duration of this ACIP meeting to assist with the meeting functions. Stephanie Thomas, Natalie Green, I'm not sure where she is, Jean Smith, and Chris Computer. We have a full agenda today and tomorrow until we adjourn at about 5:30 today and about 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Handouts of slides to be presented have been distributed to the ACIP members and are available for members of the public on the table outside this auditorium. What you're seeing now is an image of the ACIP website. Slides presented at this meeting will be posted on the ACIP website about 3 to 4 weeks after the meeting, after the figures on the slide are translated into words to enable them to be accessible by all viewers. The live webcast videos will also be posted in approximately 4 weeks. Meeting minutes are posted also on the ACIP website, generally within 90 days of the meeting. The minutes from the February 2015 meeting are currently posted on the ACIP website. Members of the press who are interested in conducting interviews with ACIP members should contact Ian Branham for assistance in arranging interviews. Can be found at the press table. The next ACIP meeting will convene at CDC on Wednesday and Thursday, October 21st and 22nd, 2015. Registration for all meeting attendees is required and will be open this Friday on the ACIP website. The registration deadline for non-U.S. citizens is September 30th, and for U.S. citizens, registration closes October 7th. Registration is not required for webcast viewing. As a reminder, for non-U.S. citizens attending ACIP meetings, completion of several forms is required for each meeting at the time of registration. It's important that these forms are submitted within the required time frame. Stephanie Thomas, the ACIP Committee Management Specialist, will be able to help with any questions about the process. We'd like to welcome our guest attendees at this meeting. We are excited to have with us two visitors from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Dr. Audrey Mulumba from the Expanded Program on Immunization, Madame Yolande Masembe, the Routine Immunization Officer from the WHO DRC. If you'd like to stand. Welcome. We would also like to recognize Dr. Antoinette Banyus, the Africa Coordinator for CVAC, a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation-funded initiative to strengthen national technical advisory committees for immunization. You could be recognized too. Thank you. Welcome. Today we have two new liaison representatives with us from the Biotechnology Industry Organization, or BIO. On day one, Dr. Leonard Friedland from GSK, and on day two, Dr. Eddie Bresnitz. And also, by way of liaison substitutions, Ms. Carol Hayes will be representing both the American College of Nurse Midwives and the American Nurses Association today. Because the public comment is very important to the ACIP meeting's function, I'd like to say a word just about public comment. Topics presented at ACIP meetings include open discussion with time reserved for public comment. Time for public comment pertaining to topics on the agenda has been scheduled following the afternoon sessions each day and also is provided prior to specific votes by the ACIP to enable these comments to be considered before the vote. Today, there will be public comments scheduled after the meningococcal vaccines section and at the end of each meeting day. People who plan to make public comments should visit the registration table at the rear of the auditorium. Ms. Stephanie Thomas will record your name and provide information on the process. Registration for public comment was also solicited in advance of this meeting in the Federal Register announcement. Given time constraints, each comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and comments not presented at this meeting may be submitted for inclusion in the meeting minutes. The ACIP uses a standard process to systematically collect and evaluate evidence behind each recommendation. More information about the grade process, the grading of recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation can be found on the ACIP website. Key factors for developing recommendations include the balance of benefits and harms, the type or quality of evidence, values and preferences, and health economic analyses. ACIP recommendation categories are Category A, which refers to a recommendation that applies to all persons in an age or risk-based group. Category B, which is a recommendation for individual clinical decision-making, or the ACIP may make no recommendation on an unresolved issue. Vaccine safety issues will continue to be presented at every ACIP meeting. At this meeting, these issues will be included as part of specific topic presentations. ACIP recommendations become policy following their approval by the CDC director and their publication in the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, the MMWR. The Affordable Care Act, which was enacted in 2010 and requires private insurance coverage for immunizations without copays or deductibles, and provided by an in-network provider, provides for health plans to have 1 year, 1 plan year from the publication of this MMWR to implement recommendations according to CDC's immunization schedules. This includes recommendations illustrated in the graphics and those described in footnotes. Every meeting, we provide an update on the status of ACIP recommendations. There have been 3 ACIP publications since February 2015, which you can see on this slide. There has been a yellow fever vaccine booster doses recommendation, updated recommendations on the use of typhoid vaccine, and recommendations for the use of 9-valent HPV vaccine. Recommendations and immunization schedules can be downloaded from the ACIP website. ACIP has a policy that every 3 to 5 years, each recommendation is reviewed and then renewed, revised, or retired. The slide on this screen shows the ACIP website where detailed instructions for submission of names of potential candidates to serve as ACIP members may be found. Applications for ACIP membership are due no later than November 13th, 2015 for the 4-year term beginning July 2016. To summarize conflict of interest provisions applicable to the ACIP, members of the ACIP agree to forego participation in certain activities related to vaccines during their tenure on the committee. For certain other interests that potentially enhance a member's expertise while serving on the committee, CDC has issued limited conflict of interest waivers. Members who conduct vaccine clinical trials or serve on data safety monitoring boards may present to the committee on matters related to those vaccines, but these members are prohibited from participating in committee votes on issues related to those vaccines. Regarding other vaccines of the concerned company, a member may participate in discussions with the proviso that he or she abstains on all votes related to vaccines of that company. It is important to note that at the beginning of each ACIP meeting, ACIP members state any conflicts of interest. We now request that everybody please turn off your cell phones to avoid disruption. And Dr. Temte will call roll and request conflict of interest disclosures.
Thank you, Dr. Winbaum. We'll start here with Dr. Bennett. Go to your right. That would be counterclockwise.
Bennett, no conflicts.
Romero, no conflicts.
Harriman, no conflicts.
Harrison, no conflict.
Pellegrini, no conflicts.
Karen, no conflicts.
Belongia, I receive research funding from MedImmune and have a conflict for influenza.
Camp, no conflicts.
Bocchini, no conflict.
Vasquez, no conflicts.
Campus Outcult, no conflicts.
Reingold, no conflicts.
Rubin, no conflicts.
Tempty, no conflict. If I can have you bring up the slides, have just a few comments here. Actually, that's the wrong one. I can tell that this is my last meeting because I believe Dr. Gene Smith put a little thing up on my desk here, which in Polish translated says, not my circus, not my monkeys. A wonderful phrase that I will be using much more now. Our June meeting, if I can have the next slide, is fraught with having to say goodbye to a number of people here. I'm also going to make some final words from a variety of individuals out there. But if I can have the next slide, one of the things that I have up here on the desk all the time is this chart that shows how the room is laid out, and seating chart, but I show the circle there because in days past we used to have two AAFP liaisons and two AAP, one from CID and one from AAP. But for a number of years, three of us who are rotating off here, Dr. Joe Bocchini, Dr. Doug Campos-Outcult, and I sat together over in that corner. And I was able to find a photo from those times. Next slide. And I can have the next slide here. When I believe Joe Bocchini has been coming here for at least the last 11 years, pretty much straight. Dr. Campos-Outcult has been coming here for the last 9 years straight. And with these two rotating off, I think we're losing about 20 years of experience. So Dr. Bocchini continues to practice pediatric infectious disease at Louisiana State University in Shreveport. Boy, just a great number of research interests, special interests in vaccines, neonatal sepsis, pharmacokinetics, toxicities, and so on in young children. Joe has been the chair of the HPV. We're not quite sure what we're going to do without him. He's also chaired the yellow fever and Japanese encephalitis work groups. He's been the ACIP liaison from COID, and a couple of publications from him going back to 2002, improved vaccine risk-benefit communication with an immunization education package, and then most recently, Immunizing Adolescents, a selective review of literature. But we have really appreciated the wisdom, the knowledge, and enthusiasm of Dr. Bocchini over the last 11 years. So, thank you, Joe. And if we come up. Next, Dr. Doug Campos-Outcult, and I've known Doug for a number of years through functions through the American Academy of Family Physicians. Doug is now at the University of Arizona College of Medicine. A lot of public health experience, including being a public health consultant to Papua New Guinea for 2 years, a lot with Maricopa County. Doug also brings a great deal of evidence-based science. He has been the liaison from AFP to the United States Preventive Services Task Force. and also is a member of the EGAP, which is the Evidence-Based Genomics Applied in Practice and Prevention group. Doug has chaired the H5N1 pandemic influenza vaccine work group. He's been involved in meningococcal hepatitis, evidence-based recommendations, general recommendations, and before that, as liaison, I think just about every other work group. So Doug has a broad experience with everything. 2002 publication, Female to Female Transmission of Syphilis, a case report, and most recently catching up on the latest U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommendations. We're going to miss Doug as well. I think Doug is going to continue on helping out with the grade support team here and an advisory group helping out with evidence-based. So thank you very much for your time, Doug. And next, Marietta Vasquez. And one of the nice things that happens when I end up Googling my colleagues here is you find out things. Marietta is a graduate of the University of Puerto Rico, which brought me, I didn't realize this, but was born and raised in Puerto Rico in San Juan. She is Associate Professor of Pediatrics and Nursing at Yale School of Medicine. And surviving the cold northern winters up there just fine. Research interests in effectiveness of vaccines, long-term outcomes of Lyme disease, which is something near and dear to our hearts in Wisconsin as well. And I'm looking for Dr. Bologna, because you probably see a little bit up your way. Marietta's been involved with general recommendations as the chair, rotavirus as the chair of that working group, meningococcal, pertussis, sample publications, effectiveness of varicella vaccine in children with HIV, and going all the way back to 2000, conservation of the respiratory syncytial virus as SH gene, which I'll have to look up sometime. So, again, thank you for your enthusiasm, your wisdom on the committee, and we will miss you as well. And next slide, I also just have to make a quick mention of Dan Hopfensberger, who retired this month from the Wisconsin Division of Health Services. Is the longest serving state immunization program manager, I believe at 38 years. And also very instrumental in development and maturation of the Wisconsin Immunization Registry. So our thanks to Dan as well. Okay. And Walt will recognize that I'm stealing this from him, the grease and glue, which I think is wonderful. Gene Smith, I just have to mention, has been instrumental in lubricating the system, making it work, and holding it together behind the scenes. So our thanks to her. This is just an email I stole from her. If nothing else, Larry and I will be remembered for championing family physicians to be ACIP members, champion nurses to be ACIP members, and now champion OB-GYN physicians to be ACIP members. I know this will come back to haunt us in some future slideshow by John Tempton. So I just had to throw this out. And Jean is always, trying to make sure we do the right thing. So the next slide shows something that she put together for ACIP members. Today, during our admin meeting, we're going to be piloting electronic voting, but, just of historic note here. Okay, so I'm going to just move on here with just some final words, things that I have learned from ACIP. I'm going to start out, next slide, and I've taken some liberty with quotes here, and the blue is what I've changed. But poor fools with all the sweat of Lord, we stand no wiser than we were before. Master and doctor are our titles for 51 years now. Without repose, we've held our erudite recitals and coaxed recommendations by the nose. Next slide. And round we go, on crooked ways are straight, and well we know that ignorance is our fate. and this is Wade. This is from 1806. And we find that no matter how much information we have, it's never enough. In 2010, we, as the ACIP, adopted GRADE. And in the wake, I heard rumbling that GRADE would turn people into numbers. I'm going to have you skip through the next 3 slides, Gene, because, and to the next one, please, and the next one. Jacob Bronowski was a Polish mathematician, and I was going to play this clip at my very first meeting as chair, but I'm going to play it now. Larry wouldn't let me with that meeting. So this is to get back at Larry in his absence, but it's just something from 41 years ago, or 42 years ago.
It's said that science will dehumanize people and turn them into numbers. That's false, tragically false. This is the concentration camp and crematorium at Auschwitz. This is where people were turned into numbers. Into this pond were flushed the ashes of some 4 million people. And that was not done by gas. It was done by arrogance. It was done by dogma. It was done by ignorance. When people believe that they have absolute knowledge with no test in reality, this is how they behave. Science is a very human form of knowledge. We are always at the brink of the known. We always feel forward for what is to be hoped. Every judgment in science stands on the edge of error and is personal. Science is a tribute to what we can know, although we are fallible. We have to cure ourselves of the itch for absolute knowledge and power. We have to touch people.
Next slide. So Jacob Bronowski ended up, interestingly, being the director of the Salk Institute. Kind of a connection back into the vaccine world. A couple things out. Also, you know, as time goes on, we deal a lot with information here. But we also have to kind of put it into more the human element. So this is just a quote from a not too distant song. Questions of science, science and progress don't speak as loud as my heart. Next slide. From T.S. Eliot, where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? And where is the knowledge we have lost in information? Next slide. So trying to put this all together, from the Grinch, they puzzled and puzzled till their puzzler was sore. Then ACIP thought of something they hadn't before. Maybe recommendations they thought don't come from a score. Maybe recommendations perhaps mean a little bit more. With the grade process, we take information, but we really, after we have that information, we filter it through things like cost effectiveness, balances of harms and benefits, and values and preferences. So one of the concerns out there is the cost effectiveness. If I can have the next slide, I'm picking on Frankie Miley here. But we worry about cost effectiveness. Is this cost effective? Is Ethan cost effective? I say to you, one baby, one child is, one teen is too many, especially when it comes to being yours. It goes back to a conversation with Mike Morrissey, saying that when it comes to those hard recommendations, what would you do for your child? Next slide. Going to just finish up here. That's kind of what the problem we have with science. We got a bunch of empiricists trying to describe things of unimaginable wonder. Today, in this session, we're going to have an unprecedented number of public comments. I don't think I've ever seen this many before. We also, as of last count, have about 40 letters that have come in, one with about 1,200 co-signatures. I have a petition with 601 co-signatures. It goes back to this being a federal advisory committee, and through grade process, we are it's our duty to not only look at all the evidence, but also consider other things, including values and preferences. We have to take our public comments, we have to listen to those, we have to consider those. So I will apologize up front. We are probably going to run late tonight, but we will allow everyone who has a public comment who's here to make that public comment. But again, it goes back to that importance of the values and preferences. Next slide. Again, this will be, I think, my 36th consecutive ACIP meeting. Evidence and transparency are necessary, but they're not sufficient. We have to consider those other things out there as well. Next slide. As a child, I first heard of the sifting and winnowing from my father. He was a UW prof as well. And I just put this up because at ACIP, I think we should ever encourage that continual and fearless sifting and winnowing by which alone the truth can be found. And to finish it off, we hope, next slide, we hope that our ACIP recommendations always ring clearly. That's the inscription on the bell up here by Sam Katz. So come take a look at that, but thank you very much, and we look forward to a very interesting meeting. We have, I believe, 5 votes, a lot of public comment. We'll try and get through. Thank you.
John, thank you so much for the beautiful tribute to all of the outgoing members and to the ACIP process. And now Dr. Schuchat.
Yeah, John, I'm going to help us get off schedule, okay?
Thank you.
So, Jean, could I have the first slide, please? First I want to thank you for your incredible service, and then I also want to thank you for the incredible material of your life that is going to be featured in this slideshow. So I did not have to do very much with it. John began his education out in Iowa studying zoology and went on to both an MD and PhD, really featuring families in his whole career. Could you go back one, please, Jean? Maybe do this manually instead of the slideshow thing. Yeah, go back, please. Okay. Can't do it? Okay. Anyhow, his PhD was on the topic of harbor seals and photoperiodicity, and went on to be a theme in his career, this idea of the circle of life, really, whether photoperiod controlled the birth timing in seals. And in particular, I want to mention Betty. Betty is my sister's name, so I was really drawn to his focus on Betty, which is was the topic of his PhD thesis in 1983. John did then continue in family medicine in Wisconsin, next slide please, and continued to carry out the full spectrum of family medicine until he dropped obstetrics in 2000. I think his own family made him feel like delivering other people's babies was a little too scary. Next slide, please. John's attraction to vaccines really goes back to that first rubella elimination meeting he attended in 2004. Next slide. And he's continued that in the international arena. I think some of you will remember Dr. Lili, who runs the National Immunization Program in China and spent an exchange with us here in Atlanta. He also visited John and saw how the Wisconsin Health Department works, how the registry works, and then invited John to China, where he was able to share the whole grade experience with the China ACIP equivalent. I think a favorite memory was the 5-face meal he enjoyed while he was there.
And that was a literal 5-face meal.
I think I might have had that myself, actually. Next slide, please. As John already mentioned, he's been connected with the Wisconsin Immunization Program, and we all miss Dan Hopsenberg, but I think 38 years really ought to be enough for anyone. I noted in this picture that the immunization program in Wisconsin does need a few more X chromosomes. Next slide, please. But I think John more than makes up for that at home with his wife Jo and great family. Next slide. Many people leave ACIP and go through a postpartum depression of sorts, but John's fishing buddies have offered to help him ease the pain. Next slide. And I really love this slide because I don't know there's anyone else in this room whose last 3 publications literally span the waterfront, from the Pacific Harbor seal Betty, who is the oldest seal on record to give birth at age 42, to his entry into the climate change debates, and then, of course, his passion for vaccine acceptance and misconceptions. Next slide. So I don't think that John's going to be suffering postpartum depression as he leaves ACIP with the great family that he enjoys. Next slide. And while we're busy with the October meeting, I think he'll be training for his next 5K. Next slide. So before I close, I do have a brief little poem. It won't do justice to the literature that John was sharing with us in his remarks, but just a little snippet from the CDC and ACIP family to you in appreciation for your service as chair. I apologize now for the jokes that very few people will get. Farewell to Dr. Tempty, whose tank is never empty. As chair, he's now quite comfy, no risk of Humpty Dumpty. In case you missed the memo, let me provide a demo. Pronunciation Tempty, no relative of Kemp. See? He kept the schedules calm till Pneumo dropped a bomb. We'll need an extra meeting. The conference lines were bleeping. His temperament so staid, he's passionate for grade. His welcome's always warm. They'll melt a southern storm. Of course we're gonna miss him, so go ahead and kiss him. Unless that is a no-no, we better check with Masso. So thank you, John. I think that Jean wanted to present you with a couple things, but personally, it's just been wonderful working with you. And I think for those who are at an ACIP meeting for the very first time, this is not how we usually start them, but John really put his own personal touch on our deliberative values and grade process. So thank you, John.
And thank you, Ann. We'll forgive you for making us 6 minutes later.
John, before Jean gives you our special presents for you, I also have a note for you from Larry Pickering in appreciation of your long work together with Larry. From Dr. Frieden, and finally a certificate for you. Thank you.
So when I was in internal medicine practice in Boston for 10 years before I came here, I was going to an antiquarian book fair one day and I found this certificate dated 1792 to Dr. Welch, pleased to inoculate 2 children of McGower on account of the town of Boston, agreeable to their vote for that purpose. W. Smith, Overseer of the Poor. This is an instruction to Dr. Welch in Boston, Mass. From W. Smith, Overseer of the Poor, to administer smallpox variolation to 2 children, August 1792. It's immaculate condition and it cost me $1. And Jose Romero sent in this chapter called Early Efforts at Control Variolation Vaccination and Isolation and Quarantine from a book called Smallpox and Its Eradication. And then back in the 1980s, the National Immunization Program, or its predecessor, created several Dr. Seuss posters and took wording from his children's books and adapted them to contain immunization messages. So this is one of them. I forget, oh, it's from If I Ran the Zoo. 1 year to 15 months after the day you were born, the vaccination bird arrives in the bright early morning, and so on and so forth. And we'll put these up later in the front of the room so you all can see them. Thank you, John.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know, I'd just like to, again, thank Larry and Cindy and Ann and Jean, Stephanie, all the folks at CDC. The lead staff I've worked with have been incredible. My family back in Oregon, Wisconsin, keeps on referring to my second family down in Atlanta, and this has been very true. But thank you very much. And I think we probably should get going with our agenda. Dr. Schuchat is vigorously nodding yes. So if I can have my agenda. Okay. If we can ask Dr. Laurie Rubin to come up to the microphone, get us started on the meningococcal vaccine. Laurie.
Good morning, welcome everyone, and congratulations to Dr. Tempe. On this slide is the list of the work group members, including the ACIP members and liaison and other representatives, and I thank them for all their contributions. So for serogroup B meningococcal vaccines, or MenB vaccines for short, there are 2 licensed in the United States and approved for use in persons 10 through 25 years of age. There's the MenB factor H binding protein, or Trememba by Pfizer, which was licensed on October 29th, 2014, and the MenB4C, or Bixero, Novartis, licensed in January 23rd of this year. Both vaccines were licensed under an accelerated pathway. And these MenB vaccines are distinct from the Men-ACWY conjugate vaccines because protection is based on developing immunity to bacterial proteins rather than capsular polysaccharides. In terms of recent work by the meningococcal work group and presentation to ACIP, in February and June of last year, there were discussions of the epidemiology of meningococcal disease outbreaks and outbreaks of serogroup B meningococcal vaccine on university campuses, and interim guidance for the use of a then investigational MenB vaccine under a CDC-sponsored expanded access IND. In the October meeting, the safety and immunogenicity of these 2 MenB vaccines were presented, as well as epidemiology of serogroup B meningococcal disease in the United States, and some initial considerations for use of meningococcal B vaccines in the United States. In this past February meeting, the considerations for use of MenB vaccines in person at increased risk, and there was a discussion and vote, which resulted in this recommendation on this slide for use of MenB vaccine in persons at increased risk. So a serogroup B meningococcal vaccine series should be administered to persons age 10 and older at increased risk for meningococcal disease, a category A recommendation, which includes persons with persistent complement component deficiencies, persons with anatomic or functional asplenia, including sickle cell disease, microbiologists routinely exposed to isolates of Neisseria meningitidis, and persons identified to be at increased risk because of a serogroup B meningococcal disease outbreak. The activities since the last meeting have resulted in a policy note on that same topic that was just published about 2 weeks ago. And the work group has been reviewing the available safety, immunogenicity, and epidemiological data and discussion about policy options for broader use of MenV vaccines in adolescents, college students. So the policy options for a broader use of MenV vaccines concern administration of a MenV vaccine series at 12 years with an anticipated booster at around 16 years, giving it at 16 years, administering at 18 years, or a college student only type recommendation. And the recommendation types would include category A, which, as was described, is for all persons in an age or risk-based factor group. The category B recommendation for individual clinical decision-making, or no recommendation. In today's session, we're going to have a grade presentation for the evidence of use of MenV vaccines in adolescents and college students by Temi Folarame. Considerations for the routine use of MenV vaccines in adolescents by Jessica McNeil. Public comment, followed by proposed policy option language and vote, potentially, and potentially a VFC vote. So, of course, these MenV vaccines certainly are challenging for the ACIP. Of course, our goal is to prevent the largest proportion of cases of meningococcal disease possible, and the recently licensed MenV vaccines are an important step forward. However, data for making policy decisions for vaccine use are not complete in terms of effectiveness, strain coverage in the United States, duration of protection, effect on carriage and herd immunity, and expanded safety. And the burden of serogroup B meningococcal disease in adolescents and young adults is currently low. Thank you for your attention.
And I think we will have the next two speakers come up before we have and take questions after both of those presentations. So if Dr. Folarame.
Good morning. We'll be presenting our grade evaluation for use of MenV vaccines in adolescents and young adults, including college students. Okay. I will review the study questions for grade, modified assessment for the quality of disease burden data, breadth of MenV strain coverage, and grade assessment for evidence of outcomes. I'll start with the study questions. The study questions we'll address is, should MenV vaccines be routinely administered to all adolescents and young adults, including college students? There are two MenV vaccines licensed in the United States. MenV-4C is a multi-component vaccine manufactured by Novartis, now GSK, and is a two-dose series. MenV-FHBP is a bivalent recombinant lipoprotein vaccine manufactured by Pfizer and is a 3-dose series. After selecting a study question, the next step in the grade process is to select outcomes that the work group feels are important and critical to answer these questions. This table shows outcomes that were ranked critical for the study questions. The first two outcomes will be evaluated using a modified assessment since they are surveillance data. The last 5 outcomes will be assessed using grade. Now I will discuss the quality of meningococcal disease burden data. Since the incidence of meningococcal disease has reached historic low in the United States in recent years, the work group felt evaluating the quality of disease burden data is a critical component for this assessment. However, because these data were from surveillance and no intervention was tested, the work group could not evaluate them using the grade format. Instead, we assessed our disease burden data for accuracy, applicability, and representativeness. The U.S. meningococcal case reporting and incidence data come from two sources: the Active Bacterial Cause Surveillance, or ABCs, and the National Notifiable Disease Surveillance System, or NNDSS. ABC is an active population-based surveillance system of 10 U.S. sites, and it's used to estimate incidence of meningococcal disease in the United States. It is limited to only culture-confirmed cases, and therefore an 18% correction factor is added to account for PCR-confirmed cases. ABC provides data on a variety of factors, including historical trend, risk factors, vaccination, and molecular data. However, due to the low case count in ABC in recent years, an integrated approach to meningococcal disease surveillance data have been used. This approach includes NNDSS, a passive surveillance system that captures information on all cases, including cases confirmed by PCR only and those considered clinically compatible. Historically, serogroups and case outcome information has been limited, but this has been supplemented by ABCs and health departments since 2005. A capture-recapture analysis that was performed in Maine from 2001 to 2006 demonstrated high sensitivity of state surveillance data when compared to hospital discharge records. Accuracy of disease burden data was improved when using an integrated approach to surveillance. Both ABCs and NNDSS surveillance system were determined to be applicable as they both capture meningococcal disease incidence in adolescents and young adults. Although ABC is limited to 10 sites and may not be representative of the national meningococcal disease incidence, NNDSS is reported by all states and thus considered representative of national meningococcal disease incidence. To complete our assessment of the burden of disease data quality, the work group looked at morbidity and mortality data using mortality data collected from ABCs and NNDSS and long-term sequelae data that were captured in published manuscripts. Estimate of case fatality rate and long-term sequelae vary depending on the source and range from 2 to 10% for case fatality rate and 5 to 50% for long-term sequelae. ABCs and NNDSS captures all meningococcal data among adolescents. However, serogroup-specific information may not always be available. Published report of long-term sequelae from all-cause bacterial meningitis are often hospital-based studies with small sample size and have limited information on age and serogroups. Based on our evaluation of meningococcal disease incidence, mortality, and morbidity data, we found minor limitation. However, we do not feel this significantly affect the quality of our burden of disease estimates. Now, I'll discuss the modified assessment of strain coverage. Vaccine targets for MenB vaccines are antigenically diverse and variably expressed among circulatory MenB strains in the US. However, there is no data demonstrating bactericidal activities against all circulating invasive MenB strains in the US. For the Pfizer vaccine, MB-FHBP, FHBP sequence analysis and measurement of surface expression by flow cytometry was performed for an epidemiologically representative collection of over 1,200 MenB strains, of which 432 were US isolates. FHBP was expressed in about 95% of the serogroup B isolate tested. Their analysis demonstrated variability between subfamilies as well as surface expression of FHBP. In a subset of isolates for which bactericidal activity was assessed, isolates with moderate or high level of expression of FHBP was predictive of bactericidal activities, whereas there was a lower correlation among isolates with low expression of FHBP. For the Novartis vaccine, MenB4C, The meningococcal antigen typing system, or MATS, was used to estimate coverage. MAT is a sandwich ELISA that measures both cross-reactivity with vaccine antigens as well as the level of expression of each antigen to predict bactericidal activity against a broad number of strains. In order to assess the immunogenicity of each antigen, 4 of the primary strains were selected based on having cross-reactivities with one vaccine antigen while having limited cross-reactivity with other vaccine antigen, and were thus not representative of circulating strain in the US. MAT was previously bridged to HSBA in a subset of antigenically diverse strains and was found to be greater than 80% predictive of bactericidal activity when one antigen was expressed above a certain threshold, and greater than 90% when at least 2 antigens were expressed above a certain threshold. Based on their analysis of over 400 US isolates, MenB4C is estimated to cover 91% of circulating strain in the US. In summary, true breadth of coverage of endemic MenB disease has only been estimated for these 2 vaccines. The manufacturers used 2 different methods to assess the breadth of coverage for their vaccines, and secondary studies to evaluate immunogenicity against additional strains are pending. Now I will report the grade assessment for evidence of outcomes. As mentioned earlier, these are the 5 outcomes for consideration in our grade analysis. Our data sources include published and unpublished data, as well as information from investigators' brochure. We included studies conducted in both US and non-US population, as long as the final formulation and the manufacturer proposed dosing for the vaccine was used. Due to the low incidence of serogroup B meningococcal disease, an efficacy trial using clinical endpoint was impractical. Therefore, vaccine efficacy estimates were based on a demonstration of a functional immune response in vaccine recipients against a small number of serogroup B strains. In studies supporting US licensure, immunogenicity was assessed by the proportion of subjects who achieved a greater than or equal to 4-fold increase in HSB titer for each of the strains tested. The proportion of the subjects who achieved a titer greater than or equal to the lower limit of quantitation of the assay for all strains, which I will refer to as the composite response. The lower limit of quantitation was defined as the lowest amount of antibody in a sample that can be reliably quantified. Although the licensure endpoints are the same, data for MenB-FHBP and MenB4C are not directly comparable because, for example, the vaccines were each tested against different serogroup B strains. This slide is a quick reminder of the criteria we use for grade analysis. The next slide describes the algorithm used to determine the final evidence type for each outcome. Randomized controlled trials start out as an evidence type of 1, and observational studies start out as 3. The 5 criteria just mentioned were assessed to determine whether the overall evidence type is moved up or down. Now I'll go through our evaluation of these outcomes for Bexarol, MenB4C. We compile data for MenB4C by outcome and study design type. There are a total of 5 studies, 1 non-control open-label studies, and 4 randomized controlled trials. The majority of the studies assessed multiple outcomes. 4 of the studies have been published. However, the work group also assessed unpublished data where available. In addition, the work group reviewed severe adverse events, or SAE data, from vaccination campaign. No study assessing safety and immunogenicity with concomitant vaccination has been completed. Now I'll review the evidence findings for benefit and harms. For evidence of benefit, short-term immunogenicity measured 1 month after the two-dose series ranged from 63 to 94% depending on the study. Persistence was measured 11 to 24 months after vaccination with the two-dose series and ranged from 66 to 94% depending on the study. For evidence of arms, we focused on SAEs. Of all the studies we assessed, a total of 3,140 participants took at least one dose of the vaccine. 67 SAEs were reported among the vaccine subjects. In most cases, the SAE rate was similar between the MenB vaccine group and other groups within each study. 5 serious adverse events were considered related to MenB vaccines, and no concerning pattern was observed among these SAEs. 2 deaths unrelated to the vaccine were reported in one of the studies. Review of SAE surveillance data from vaccination campaign conducted in Princeton, Santa Barbara, and Quebec showed that of the 59,000 participants who took at least one dose of the vaccines, 60 SAEs were reported and 3 SAEs were considered related to the vaccine. All 3 SAEs resolved over time. 1 death was reported but determined to be unrelated to the vaccine. Next, I will review the evidence type for benefit and arms. Under the risk of bias, the work group downgraded persistence in immunogenicity outcome by 1 due to potential selection bias and unplanned sample size determination. Under consistency, the work group downgraded short-term immunogenicity outcome by 1 due to high heterogeneity between studies. Under indirectness, the work group downgraded both short-term immunogenicity and persistent in immunogenicity outcomes by 1 each for indirect assessment of vaccine efficacy. Under imprecision, the work group downgraded SAE outcomes by 1 because the confidence interval around effect estimate include both effect and non-effect. And finally, the work group upgraded short-term immunogenicity outcome by 1 for the strong strength of association. The overall evidence type is 2 for short-term immunogenicity, 3 for persistent in immunogenicity, 2 for the 2 serious adverse events. Safety and immunogenicity for 2 for serious adverse event and safety and immunogenicity following concomitant vaccination was not assessed. This slide is a summary of the balance between benefit and harm as well as their evidence type. Next, we'll look at evidence type for Trumemba, MenB, FHBP. For MenB FHBP, there were a total of 7 studies, 2 non-control studies, and 5 randomized control studies. The majority of studies also assess multiple outcomes. 3 of the studies have been published. Non-published data were also reviewed from these studies. For evidence of benefits, short-term immunogenicity measured 1 month after a 3-dose series ranged from 81 to 80% depending on the study. Based on non-inferiority criteria, no immunologic interference was observed for ACW vaccine, Tdap vaccine, DTaP, and IPV vaccines, and 3 of the HPV vaccine antigens. Persistence was measured at 48 months after vaccination with a 3-dose series and demonstrated protective titer against 3 of the 4 primary strains in more than 50% of the subjects. For evidence of harm, a total of 11,330 participants, 190 SAEs were reported among subjects, and in most cases, the SAE rate was similar between vaccine groups and other groups within each studies. 7 SAEs were considered related to MenB FHBP, no concerning pattern was observed among these events. One death, unrelated to vaccine, was reported. Next, I will cover our determination of the evidence type for benefit of arm for adolescent, young adult, as well as college students. Under the risk of bias, the work group downgraded persistence in immunogenicity outcome by 1 due to its very small sample size. Under indirectness, the work group downgraded short-term immunogenicity, persistent in immunogenicity, and MenB immunogenicity with concomitant vaccination outcomes by 1 each due to the use of immunologic correlate of protection to measure efficacy. Under imprecision, the work group downgraded both SAE outcomes by 1 each because the confidence interval around the effect estimate include both effect and non-effect. Finally, the work group upgraded short-term immunogenicity outcome by 1 due to the strong strength of association. The overall evidence type turned out to be 2 for short-term immunogenicity, 4 for persistent in immunogenicity at 48 months, 2 for MenB immunogenicity with concomitant vaccination, and 2 for both serious adverse events. This slide is a summary of the balance between benefit and harm as well as their evidence type. The next slide is also a summary of both vaccines. I'd like to thank the following people for their contribution to the great evaluation. That concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions after Jessica's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I will now present a summary of the work group's considerations for use of serogroup B meningococcal vaccines in adolescents. I will begin by summarizing the data reviewed by the work group and will then present the policy options and the work group's considerations for use of MenB vaccines in adolescents and the proposed policy option language for today's vote. In the United States, the incidence of meningococcal disease is currently at a historic low. In 2013, 564 cases of meningococcal disease were reported. The lines on this figure represent incidence by serogroup, and the bars indicate vaccine coverage among adolescents. Declines in incidence have been observed for all of the serogroups, including serogroup B, which is not included in the meningococcal conjugate vaccines. In addition, despite steady increases in coverage with conjugate vaccine among adolescents, much of the declines in incidence occurred prior to high levels of coverage in adolescents. In 2013, coverage with 1 or more doses of conjugate vaccine was estimated to be 77% among 13 to 17-year-olds, but varied from 40 to 94% by state. 2-dose series completion was estimated to be less than 30%. As the current adolescent program has become more established, the first impact of the program on rates of serogroup C, Y, and W meningococcal disease has been observed. The combined incidence of serogroups C, Y, and W has decreased by 80% from 2004 to 2005 to 2012 to 2013 among 11 through 19-year-olds. The same decline in incidence has not been observed among persons in age groups that are not routinely receiving conjugate vaccines, including infants less than 1 year of age and persons 20 years of age and older. This figure shows incidence of meningococcal disease by serogroup and single year of life for adolescents. Incidence in this age group is similar for serogroup B and serogroups C and Y combined. The remaining burden of serogroups C and Y disease in this age group highlights the need for additional efforts to reinforce the importance of the second dose of the conjugate vaccine in the current adolescent program. Estimated annual cases, deaths, and cases that result in long-term sequelae from serogroup B and serogroups C and Y meningococcal disease are shown in this table. We estimate that in recent years, serogroup B causes approximately 55 to 65 cases annually in 11 through 24-year-olds. Nearly 80% of those cases occur in older adolescents and young adults 16 through 24 years of age. In the United States, approximately 61% of 18 through 23-year-olds enroll in college. Information on college attendance for meningococcal cases is collected through ABCs, but is not collected through our National Notifiable Diseases Surveillance System. In recent years, approximately 40% of serogroup B cases among all 18 through 23-year-olds reported to ABCs attended college. We can apply that proportion to serogroup B cases reported to NNDSS in this age group to estimate the number of meningococcal cases occurring in college students nationwide. In 2009 through 2013, there were an estimated 14 cases of serogroup B meningococcal disease in college students annually, with 2 deaths in this age group. And the incidence of serogroup B meningococcal disease among college students was similar to the incidence among all 18 through 23-year-olds and non-college students. Although we estimated a similar risk for serogroup B meningococcal disease in college students and non-college students in this age group, 7 clusters or outbreaks of serogroup B meningococcal disease have been reported to CDC from university campuses since 2009, including 2 since the beginning of 2015. As a result of these outbreaks, we expanded the number of surveillance sites reporting information on college attendance so that we could better track the burden of disease in this group. Beginning in 2013, we established enhanced surveillance for cases of meningococcal disease among college students in an area which covers approximately 60% of the U.S. population. In 2013 and 2014, approximately 65% of serogroup B cases among 18 through 23-year-olds in these sites have been reported in college students, with 2 deaths reported each year. However, even with the enhanced surveillance sites collecting additional information on cases occurring in this population, we know there are years where more cases and deaths occur. For example, in 2014, 3 deaths from serogroup B meningococcal disease in college students were reported to CDC, one of which occurred outside of our enhanced surveillance area. So to summarize, the United States is currently experiencing a historic low in meningococcal disease incidence, and the incidence of disease has declined for all meningococcal serogroups, including serogroup B, which is not included in the conjugate vaccines. For the last several years, we have remained at a stable low in disease incidence with approximately 55 to 65 cases of serogroup B meningococcal disease reported in adolescents and young adults each year. The majority of serogroup B cases in adolescents occur in older adolescents and young adults 16 through 24 years of age. Approximately 40 to 70% of serogroup B cases in 18 through 23-year-olds occur in college students. However, incidence in both college and non-college students is similar. Next, I will review the immunogenicity data for the MenB vaccines. There are 2 serogroup B meningococcal vaccines licensed in the United States for use in persons 10 through 25 years of age. MenB FHBP contains both subfamilies of FHBP and is administered as a 3-dose series. MenB FHBP was licensed by FDA in October 2014. MenB 4C contains 4 components and is administered as a 2-dose series. MenB 4C was licensed for use in the United States by FDA in January 2015 and is also licensed in a number of other countries for use in persons 2 months of age and older. As you previously heard in Temi's presentation, vaccine efficacy was estimated from serum bactericidal antibodies against a small number of serogroup B strains. In studies supporting U.S. licensure, immunogenicity was assessed by both the proportion of subjects who achieved a greater than or equal to 4-fold increase in HSBA titer for each of the strains tested, and the proportion of subjects who achieved a greater than or equal to, or achieved a titer greater than or equal to the lower limit of quantitation of the assay for all strains, or the composite response. Although licensure endpoints are the same, data from MenB FHBP and MenB 4C are not directly comparable. The complete immunogenicity and safety data that supported licensure of MB-FHBP was presented by Pfizer at the October 2014 ACIP meeting. But to summarize, MB-FHBP has a demonstrated immune response in the general adolescent population. 84% of subjects had a composite HSBA response to 4 strains after 3 doses, and 50% had a composite response after 2 doses. Data on concomitant administration of MB-FHBP and the other adolescent vaccines is reassuring. No immunologic interference was observed for serogroup B or vaccine antigens, including HPV types 6, 11, and 16, MenACWY, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, and IPV antigens. For HPV type 18, non-inferiority criteria were not met for the GMT ratio at 1 month after the 3rd quadrivalent HPV vaccination. However, 99% of subjects achieved seroconversion for all 4 HPV antigens. Antibody persistence data through 48 months post-dose 3 from MB-FHBP was recently presented to the work group. As you will see here, the proportion of subjects with HSBA titers greater than or equal to 1 to 4 peaks at 1 month following the 3rd dose for all 4 strains tested. For strains A22 and B24, which represent more prevalent FHBP subvariants in the United States, the proportion of subjects with protective titers falls quickly to approximately 60% by 6 months following the 3rd dose, but then remains stable through 48 months post-dose 3. The immunogenicity and safety data for MenB-4C was also presented during the October 2014 ACIP meeting. Immunogenicity data from the 3 main trials conducted in Canada and Australia, the UK, and Chile were used to assess the effectiveness of MenB-4C. 63 to 94% of subjects had a composite HSBA response to 3 strains after 2 doses. The immunogenicity data from the Canadian-Australian study, conducted in adolescents 11 through 17 years of age, was included in the package insert because the HSBA responses generated by the study participants were more likely representative of the responses in the U.S. population as compared to the Chilean study, which also enrolled adolescents 11 through 17 years of age. The UK study, conducted in young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 years of age, was also included, and therefore the HSBA responses in these participants were included in the package insert to provide data on young adults 18 through 25 years of age. Antibody persistence following 2 doses of MenB-4C has been examined in 2 of these studies. 66% of subjects in a study among UK university students maintained a composite HSBA response to the 3 strains 11 months post-dose 2. Among Chilean adolescents, 77 to 94% maintained an HSBA response greater than or equal to 1 to 4, 18 to 24 months post-dose 2. However, pre-vaccination HSBA titers were also higher in the Chilean adolescents compared to what is expected for the U.S. population. No concomitant administration data is available for MenB-4C. Recently, preliminary results from a seroprevalence survey done at Princeton University by Nicole Basta were also shared with the work group. As a reminder, between March 2013 and March 2014, 9 cases of serogroup B meningococcal disease occurred in persons linked to Princeton University, including 1 death. Laboratory typing results were identical for the 8 isolates that were available, and all were ST409, which is uncommonly seen in the United States. A mass vaccination campaign using MenB-4C was held in December 2013, and a second dose campaign was held in February 2014. Smaller catch-up campaigns were held following each mass clinic. Overall coverage among undergraduates by the end of the vaccination campaigns was 98% for the first dose and 93% for the second dose. A cross-sectional seroprevalence survey was launched in April 2014, and 607 participants were enrolled. The percentage of Princeton students with an HSBA titer greater than or equal to 1 to 4 and the associated GMTs for the Princeton outbreak strain are shown in this table along with the vaccination status of participants. If we focus on the largest group of subjects who received both doses during the mass clinics in December and February, you will see that approximately 66% of subjects had an HSBA titer greater than or equal to 1 to 4 against the outbreak strain in April 2014, 2 months after the second dose of MenB-4C. From the original 607 participants, a subset of 245 samples were selected to assess immune response against one of the vaccine strains. What you see here is that nearly all subjects who received 2 doses of MenB4C had HSPA titers greater than or equal to 1 to 4 against the 599 or NADA vaccine reference strain. In addition, GMTs were much higher for the vaccine reference strain compared to the outbreak strain. To summarize the workgroup's interpretation of the available immunogenicity data, immunogenicity studies predict efficacy of the MenB vaccine in the short term. However, there is evidence of waning antibody levels within 6 months post-dose 3 for MenB FHBP, and there appears to be modest antibody waning observed through 24 months post-dose 2 for MenB4C. In addition, in the Princeton study, the proportion of responders to the outbreak strain appeared to be lower to the vaccine reference strain, which highlights that the proportion of vaccinees who develop bactericidal antibodies protective against each outbreak or circulating strain may differ. Next, I will review the safety data for the MenB vaccines. In the clinical trials, post-vaccination local and systemic complaints were common. The most frequently solicited adverse events was pain at the injection site, fever, headache, fatigue, myalgia, and arthralgia. These reactions were typically self-limited and resolved within 3 to 7 days. The MenB vaccines were more reactogenic than other routine vaccines for adolescents based on the proportion of subjects who report the most severe category of local and systemic adverse events. Rates of serious adverse events reported in the clinical trials were similar between vaccine recipients and controls. There is some limited experience with the safety of MenB vaccines outside of clinical trials. Most of our experience is with MenB4C, which was administered to approximately 17,000 persons vaccinated under expanded access programs for outbreak response at 2 U.S. universities and over 40,000 persons vaccinated in a regional public health program in Quebec. No concerning patterns among the adverse events were observed following any of these vaccination programs. For MenB FHBP, safety data is being collected during one of the recent outbreak responses. However, that data is not yet available. The work group also reviewed data from animal models that showed autoantibodies in some animals following vaccination with a MenB vaccine, which raises theoretical concerns about the development of autoimmune disorders. FDA reviewed the clinical data and did not observe differences in rates of autoimmune disorders between vaccine recipients and controls, and the data does not suggest a higher incidence of autoimmune conditions following vaccination than what is observed in the general population. Theoretically, onset of autoimmune symptoms could be delayed well beyond vaccination, and post-licensure safety surveillance will need to be conducted to detect any potential safety signals. However, it will require a large number of doses to be administered to detect any potential safety signals in VSD, and in the meantime, monitoring of VAERS reports will be done. The adverse reactions listed on this slide are not specific to the MenB vaccines, but should be considered in the benefit-risk assessment of any type of vaccine. Shoulder injury related to vaccine administration has been recognized in case reports. The incidence is unknown, though it appears to be very rare. Syncope occurs at a rate of about 1 per 1,000 doses and can lead to injuries from falling. Anaphylaxis may also occur following any type of vaccine and occurs at a rate of 0.21 to 1.53 per 1 million doses administered. MenB FHBP and MenB4C have each had 1 case of anaphylaxis reported to date. The workgroup's interpretation of the MenB safety data is that post-vaccination local and systemic complaints are common following MenB administration, but the reactions are typically self-limited. The most common adverse event reported was pain at the injection site. Potentially serious adverse events may occur following any vaccine, and they should be considered in light of the current low disease burden. To date, no concerning patterns of serious adverse events have been reported for the MenB vaccines. However, theoretical concerns have been raised from animal models about autoimmune disorders and will need to be monitored through post-licensure safety surveillance. The workgroup also considered additional data, which will be summarized next. A cost-effectiveness analysis for routine use of serogroup B meningococcal vaccines in adolescents and college students was completed by Ishmael Ortega Sanchez and has been included in the ACIP background materials. This was a Monte Carlo simulation analysis for a hypothetical 4 million person birth cohort or a 2.8 million person college cohort. The time frame for the analysis was 15 years. The analytic horizon was age-specific life expectancy, and the discount rate was 3%. The key assumptions for the model were the age and serogroup B specific average annual incidence rates and the case fatality ratios from 1994 through 2013. The initial vaccine effectiveness was assumed to be between 85 and 95%, and waning protection was modeled based on the available antibody persistence data for MenB FHBP and MenB 4C. The cost of vaccination for a 2 or 3 dose series was $402. It is estimated that approximately 15 to 30 cases and 2 to 5 deaths could be prevented with a routine adolescent program at 11, 16, or 18 years of age. A college student-only recommendation would prevent approximately 10 cases and 1 death. The number needed to vaccinate to prevent either a case or a death is high. Nearly 100,000 to 400,000 persons would need to be vaccinated to prevent 1 case, and nearly 1 to 3 million persons would need to be vaccinated to prevent a death. The cost per QALY saved ranged from approximately $4 million to $9 million in this analysis. There is currently limited data available on the impact of the MenB vaccines on carriage. In a study done in a university in the UK, 31 to 34% of subjects carried any Neisseria meningitidis at study entry. No significant difference in carriage was detected between the study groups at 1 month after vaccination with MenB 4C. However, a modest decrease in carriage was observed during the 12 months after vaccination. In addition, 2 carriage surveys were initiated in February of this year at schools experiencing serogroup B outbreaks. The surveys are being done in conjunction with MenB FHBP mass vaccination campaigns at these schools. Baseline carriage was assessed during administration of the first dose, and post-dose 1 carriage was assessed during the second dose mass vaccination clinics. Additional rounds of the carriage study are planned for the fall of 2015 at both schools. Preliminary results from both surveys showed no change in carriage prevalence in the student population from baseline to post-dose 1. Another important consideration for the use of MenB vaccines is breadth of coverage. The genetic and antigen expression data predict the MenB vaccines should cover a wide range of circulating meningococcal strains in the United States, but they will not cover all strains. The immunogenicity data that is currently available is directed against a few select strains. However, testing against additional strains is planned as part of post-licensure commitments to FDA by both manufacturers. However, the proportion of the population that will respond to each circulating strain is currently unknown, and one example of this is the lower responses that were observed to the Princeton outbreak strain. The currently available data does not allow us to predict the proportion of the population who will respond for each outbreak or sporadic disease-causing strain. In summary, there are a number of challenges to keep in mind when considering the use of MenB vaccines in the U.S. First, the proportion of serogroup B cases that could be prevented with a MenB vaccine is unknown. Breadth of strain coverage has only been estimated. Actual breadth of coverage is unknown or unclear. In addition, available antibody persistence data suggests the MenB vaccines may have a limited duration of protection. In addition, vaccine effectiveness data is not yet available, as licensure was based on serum bactericidal activity, and universal programs have not yet been implemented in any country. The potential impact of the MenB vaccines on carriage is also unknown, as is the potential impact that vaccine pressure will have on circulating strains. Next, I will review the different policy options considered and will summarize the work group's considerations. The work group has considered several policy options for broader use of MenB vaccines in adolescents. Ages for the recommended administration of a MenB vaccine series that were considered included at 11 or 12 years, with an anticipated booster at 16 years of age, or a series at 16 or 18 years of age, or a recommendation in college students only. In addition, the work group considered different recommendation types, including Category A, which is a recommendation for all persons in an age or risk factor-based group, Category B, which are recommendations made for individual clinical decision-making, or no recommendation. After reviewing the data, the consensus of the work group was to support a policy option that included vaccination of all adolescents rather than college students only. The work group's considerations included that an important burden of serogroup B meningococcal disease cases in 18 through 23-year-olds occur in persons not attending college, and that it would be challenging to get students vaccinated with 2 or 3 doses before arriving on college campuses, and that vaccinating college students would prevent the fewest cases and deaths of the options considered. However, the work group also acknowledges the impact that cases and outbreaks have on college campuses, both in terms of the cost for vaccination campaigns in response to these outbreaks, as well as public concern. The work group considered 3 options for the preferred timing of the MemB series, including at 11, 16, or 18 years of age. Based on the available antibody persistence data, the work group felt that there was a need to administer the MemB vaccine series in later adolescence, preferably at age 18, in order to maximize the likelihood that protection would last into the highest risk period. However, the work group also recognized that young adults may still be under the care of a pediatrician at 16 years of age. It is less likely that they will receive care from a pediatrician at age 18. They should also be making a visit to their healthcare provider at age 16 for the MenACWY conjugate booster. Based on these considerations, the majority of the work group members preferred language recommending administration between 16 and 18 years of age. For the college-bound population, this also may make it more likely that they complete the 2 to 3 dose series before entering college in the highest age-related risk period. The work group currently favors a Category B rather than a Category A recommendation for 2 main reasons. First, the current burden of disease is low, which means that the number needed to vaccinate to prevent a case and death is high, and the number of cases prevented may be comparable to the number of serious adverse reactions to vaccine. Secondly, additional data to consider routine recommendations are still needed. Most importantly, a better understanding of the true proportion of serogroup B cases that could be prevented with MenB vaccine, including data on vaccine effectiveness and the impact of MenB vaccines on carriage and herd immunity. The work group does recognize that historically, Category B recommendations for use of polysaccharide vaccine in college students was unpopular and interpreted as difficult to understand. The recommendation was that college students and their parents be informed by healthcare providers of the risks of meningococcal disease and the potential benefits of vaccination with a polysaccharide vaccine. College and university health services were also to facilitate implementation of educational programs about meningococcal disease and the availability of vaccination services, and polysaccharide vaccine was to be made available to persons for vaccine vaccination. In several states, this Category B recommendation was translated into legislation requiring colleges to provide information on the risks of meningococcal disease to students or mandated vaccination of certain students. Finally, there are additional programmatic considerations which the work group discussed, such as implementation challenges of a MenB multi-dose vaccine schedule, that there is no platform for a 2 or 3 dose vaccine series in late adolescence. The current MenACWY vaccine program in adolescents is at 11 to 12 years of age with a booster at 16, which makes communications challenging when there are differing recommendations for the conjugate vaccine and the MenB vaccines. Also, MenACWY is not currently recommended for other groups with similar or higher risk, but that may need to be reconsidered if a Category B recommendation is made for MenB in adolescents. In summary, the meningococcal work group acknowledges that meningococcal disease is a rare but serious illness and each case is life-threatening. However, important data for making policy recommendations for MenB vaccines are not yet available. There was a strong desire on the work group to ensure access to MenB vaccines, as well as an understanding that additional work still needs to be done to reinforce the 2nd dose of the conjugate vaccine in the current adolescent program. The risk of meningococcal disease is low, however, cases do occur. It is difficult to accept that in the absence of a vaccination program, there may be cases that are preventable. However, even with a fully implemented vaccination program, the MenB vaccines will not prevent all cases. And now for the proposed policy option language. The work group proposes the following language for use of MenB vaccines in adolescents. A serogroup B meningococcal vaccine series may be administered to adolescents and young adults 16 through 23 years of age to provide short-term protection against most strains of serogroup B meningococcal disease. The preferred age for vaccination is 16 through 18 years of age, and it would be a Category B recommendation. In addition, the following language would be provided as guidance for use. MenB vaccine should be administered either as a 2-dose series of MenB4C or a 3-dose series of MenB FHPP. The same vaccine product should be used for all doses. Based on available data and expert opinion, MenB4C and MenB FHPP may be administered concomitantly with other vaccines indicated for this age at a different anatomic site if feasible, and no product preference would be stated. And I'd now be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, both presenters, for very succinct and thorough presentations. We are open for any questions. Yes, Dr. Belinja.
You have to press the...
There we go. Hear me okay? I noted in the MenB4C trial that there was episode of thyroiditis and I believe 2 episodes of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis that were thought to be vaccine related. And I wondered if anyone has any information on why that was thought to be the case. And also, given that the vaccine is licensed in multiple other countries, do we have any post-licensure data on safety from other countries that can help us understand what potential risks there might be?
Well, I can't answer your first question, but I'll answer the second question. So these vaccines have been licensed in several other countries, but there's not currently any programs that have been implemented. The UK is set to start vaccinating in September of this year, and so after that we will have more information, but right now we don't have any post-licensure safety information from other countries.
And follow up to that, Jessica, what is the program coming in the UK?
It'll be an infant program.
Yes, Dr. Harrison.
So, Jessica, you mentioned the potential impact of a Category A recommendation. What do you think the impact will be of a Category B recommendation? And we've tended to stay away from Category B recommendations, and I guess my bias is that for a disease with a relatively high case fatality rate, that a Category B recommendation probably should be avoided.
So are you talking in terms of the cost effectiveness and the potential impact?
Yeah, I'm wondering what the impact would be of a Category B recommendation on cases prevented, deaths prevented, and college outbreaks prevented.
Right, I think a lot of that depends on how widely the vaccine is taken up, how much coverage there is in the population, which is a bit unknown at this point. I think potentially in college students especially, there may be mandates or recommendations for college students to get vaccinated by the individual schools, and so probably coverage will be highest in those groups, but we really don't know at this point.
And I'm wondering if Dr. Evans wants to make a comment regarding what role colleges, residential colleges, universities would have, and the likelihood that they would, I don't know if they can mandate, but strongly recommend a vaccine.
Okay, was your first question, can they be mandated for entry into schools? They can be, and in general, my observation and my experience is that private universities have a wider range of recommendations, maybe mirroring what CDC and ACIP recommendations are for college-age students. On smaller universities and public universities, it's a broader range, and some of them will select certain immunizations for requirement. With this type, with the Category B recommendation, I think there would be less likely a mandated requirement, but it would be probably become part of information campaigns.
Thank you. Dr. Rungold.
So I have a question and a comment. The question is, on your third slide, you show the incidence rates for the different meninge serogroups, and the declines are indistinguishable for B and for the ones that are in the ACY W135 vaccine. But then in the next slide, you show pretty compelling evidence that the decline in ACY W135 is limited to the group that's been targeted for vaccination, which seems to me to be an interesting distinction that's hard for me to understand. I wonder if you have an explanation for that. So that's my question. My comment is that I was very happy to hear that you did not opt for a college-only recommendation. There is really very much an equity issue. In our country, it's primarily better off people who go to college. And so to me, the only reason to focus on college students would be if the rate of disease was substantially higher in college students, which it clearly isn't. So I think the other reason you should have put on your slide it has to do with the equity issue.
Right, and to answer your first question, we really don't know why rates of meningococcal disease have come down and continue to come down in the population overall. I mean, there's been a lot of theories, but we don't have a good answer.
Ms. Pellegrini, I have Dr. Lair, and then Dr. Karen.
Thank you. Can you help me understand the thoughts around the work group's consideration of the dosing schedules, that you had the consideration of 11, starting at age 11 or 12, and would that be 2 or 3 doses and then a booster dose, a third or fourth at age 16?
So it would be a complete series at 11 or 12 years of age, and then we don't have any data yet, but we're anticipating, based on the antibody persistence, that a booster would be needed again at 16, so it would be an additional dose. Or we don't even know for sure that it's single dose at that point. It may be multiple doses. We just don't have a lot of information.
Right. Because I do think that this problem that we don't have a platform for late adolescence, and that getting any teenager into the doctor more than once in 1 year is difficult. Getting a 17 or 18-year-old in more than once, I think we're setting ourselves up for really poor compliance rates.
Dr. Lair?
I'm basically wanting to make sure that my calculations are correct. So if I'm reading the slides correctly, the 18 to 24-year-olds have about 50 or 60 cases in that age group. When I calculate out a cohort of about 4 million per year, that ends up being about a 1 in a million incidence rate, if that's true for B. Then I go into anaphylaxis, and your rate is about 0.2 to 1.5 per million doses. But you also mentioned that both of the studies so far have shown that both small studies have already had 1 case of anaphylaxis. So in the 11,000 study, it was 1 anaphylaxis, and in the 60,000 study, it was 1 anaphylaxis. So if you extrapolated those, you'd be saying that there's a higher rate of anaphylaxis than possibly other vaccines. If I'm doing my math correctly, we've got a 1 in a million case incidence, and we've got between a 17 and 100 cases of anaphylaxis per million. And I just wanted to check and see if that math was correct.
And I mean, right now there's been a case of anaphylaxis for each vaccine, but I don't think that we have enough information to say that rates are higher for these vaccines at this point. I think it's just what's been observed.
But that's the data we have.
Right.
Dr. Karen.
Yes, this is referring to the policy option language and the issue of strain diversity. And I was just wondering, with what confidence can we say short-term protection against most strains of serogroup B meningococcal disease, bridging from the genetic and antigenic characterization to the serum bactericidal assays that differ between vaccines? Just a question.
I mean, I don't think we necessarily know for sure. I mean, they've only been tested against a few strains. I think we are assuming that the majority of strains, of serogroup B strains in the U.S. will be covered, but I think time will tell. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add.
Dr. Gorman.
Could you go back to slide 6, please?
Thank you, Jean.
So if I'm reading this slide correctly, like my colleague from the American Academy of Family Practice, I have trouble with math sometimes. But it appears to me the recommendation language would exclude 75% of the cases of serogroup B for potential protection. You're recommending that 16 to 18-year-olds get vaccinated permissively, and to use old language, and that's 54 out of the 203 or 67 of the 260. What drove that recommendation for that particular age range?
So in the range of cases between 11 to 24 years of age, 80% of those are actually occurring in adolescents who are 16 to 24 years of age. So most of the cases in that age group are actually occurring in the last part of that age group, which is also part of the reason why we went with the recommendation a bit later of age. There's very few cases in the 11 to 15-year-olds.
That I understand, but why wasn't the recommendation for less than 5 years old? Were there more cases? I understand that.
Dr. Shugat.
It's not licensed in that age group. Right.
And just in follow-up to Ms. Pellegrini's comment, just so it's on the record, right now there's no FDA licensure for revaccination with the vaccine. It's licensed for either 2 doses or 3 doses. I just want to make sure that's clear. And do we know if the manufacturers are planning to look at studies for revaccination?
Laura York, Pfizer.
Can we bring up the mic?
Laura York, Pfizer. Yes, we have studies that are ongoing, and in fact, we will be boosting individuals that receive vaccine about 4 years prior to this time. We won't have those data until probably next year, but we should be able to provide that data as soon as we have it available.
Thank you.
Dr. Leonard Friedman from GSK. GSK's attention right now is focused on a pentavalent meningococcal ACWYB combination vaccine, and with that vaccine we'll be studying doses, including booster doses as well. But our focus is with the pentavalent ACWYB for the future.
And thank you very much for that information. Dr. Herman.
So I have comments, not questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So with regard to cost effectiveness analyses, I mean, I think we have to look at those with caution, especially when they're done before the widespread use of a vaccine, because we know that the costs can go up or down depending on if there's herd immunity or not, or if extra doses are needed. Also, it's also known that cost effectiveness analyses favor common but less severe diseases over rare but very severe diseases. And the public shows a preference for trying to protect against rare but severe diseases. So I think we just have to keep that in mind when we're looking at cost effectiveness. Also, I would have liked to have seen some analyses done with different price points other than the manufacturer's retail price. Presumably the UK is getting a much less expensive vaccine, and obviously cost effectiveness analyses are exquisitely sensitive to both cost and incidence. And on that note, I'd like to see really better incidence data as well. And then just one more comment to follow on Dr. Harrison's comment. I'm really glad that we have such a thing as a Category B recommendation that gets paid for. That's a great thing to have. But I do worry that it may be seen as a less important vaccine then, and it may not be offered or recommended as often. And I just think it's hard to explain to a parent whose child has died of meningococcal B disease why a vaccine was available and it wasn't recommended for their child.
And if I can interject, everything you said there really reflects the grade process in that after you do the evidence evaluation, in trying to formulate recommendations into a category A or B or no recommendation, we use cost effectiveness. We look at balance of benefits and harm, as Dr. Lair has pointed out, in terms of potential adverse effects. We look at, as you just mentioned, the values and preferences of our stakeholders, our liaisons, and the general public. And we have to put that all together. And it's nice when we have both the, I'm paraphrasing here, but the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns with this vaccine going forward, to have a variety of options there in terms of making recommendations. Yeah, Dr. Kemp.
Yeah, I just want to return to something Dr. Belongia brought up. You know, we're looking at potentially small benefits, so we have to look very carefully at potential risks. 3 cases of thyroiditis and rheumatoid, 2 cases of rheumatoid arthritis together in something like 3,000 people. I guess I'd like to know more about why those were related to the vaccine. So does anyone have that information here?
Dr. Schuchat.
I was just going to say, I think the companies may have it if either of them is familiar with that data. I don't think CDC has more details on that.
Dr. Friedland from GSK. I do not have the information about those 3 cases. We've been following over 45,000 patients now in post-marketing studies where vaccines have been used both in the U.S. and outside of the U.S., and we're not seeing any signals related to concern about autoimmunity. We'll continue to follow this very closely throughout all of our trials and use around the world.
Laura York, Pfizer. We understand that this is always a concern, particularly in adolescent population, and I think it was actually said by Jessica McNeil that the FDA did review all of this. You have to understand, under a clinical trial, all of these things are investigated very clearly and looked at in terms of vaccine relatedness, and there was no indication of increased risk compared to the general rate of those autoimmune diseases. So the FDA did review all of those data that were available and didn't see it.
And Dr. Baker.
Just a comment about Category B. The beauty of Category B is that we have an FDA licensed, we have 2 vaccines that, with the data, which is limited in terms of, the problem is denominators here. We don't know whether this is going to stay flat for 3 million people versus 3,000, 11,000. So that's very difficult. But Category B, we have a licensed vaccine. And the thing that makes, because it took me a long time to learn this, the thing that makes this appealing for me is that individual physicians or parents or of age young adults can have a discussion with their doctor whether they are under the VFC program and wouldn't have the funds to pay for the vaccine out of pocket. Someone else has already commented that it's the age group, not necessarily the college attendance, so the equity issue is addressed through Category B.
And just to reemphasize that, Dr. Baker, that a Category B recommendation automatically falls under Vaccine for Children program, and it falls under the Affordable Care Act. So one of the concerns out there is you make a recommendation that creates inequity, and regardless of Category A or B, that does not. On the flip side, a no recommendation does create a situation where people who can afford a vaccine can get it, and those who cannot afford will choose not to. Dr. Moore.
Thank you. Kelly Moore with the Association of Immunization Managers. This vaccine and the debate around it makes me think, you know, we wish we could prevent all of the disease possible, and we just have so many unknowns around how well this vaccine is going to perform. I wanted to come back to the spread of short-term immunogenicity results in the randomized controlled trials. I was perturbed by seeing 63% up to over 90%. Is there a biologic explanation for why we see such a spread in those results? And then I have a second comment/question. From a programmatic standpoint, we'll be looking at how to implement Category B recommendations and how they're presented in IISs. And that, from the program standpoint, as we listen and pay attention, we want to try to understand how best to convey the intention of the committee in how we do vaccine forecasting with IISs, and what will we say when a 16-year-old comes in? Should it be left off the forecasted recommendation list, listed somehow differently? And many of us don't yet have ways to show that it's a permissive recommendation, if you will, or Category B. So there's some programmatic issues that we're going to have to contend with based on our recommendation here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and so the data from the HSBA, it came from either 3 strains or 4 strains. And so on the higher end, some of those studies were done in populations where the epidemiology is quite different from here in the US. And so, for example, in Chile, the baseline titers were about 20% that people had a baseline titer, which probably indicates higher levels of carriage. So there may have been some pre-existing immunity, which may increase that. And then compared to more populations that are more similar to the US, where it's a little bit lower. I don't know if anyone else wants to add.
Stan Gallagher with American Osteopathic Association. Not to answer any of those questions, Kelly, but it's a different. Just to remind us, as a practicing clinician, in getting that call in the middle of the night during flu season, the rapidity of the illness of meningococcal disease, how fast it comes. I feel much better counseling a patient if I know they've had a meningitis vaccine and all the up-to-date vaccinations. When I discuss the issue on the telephone at 9 of the patient with 102 temperature and muscle aches, period.
And up to the microphone, please.
Laura York from Pfizer. I just wanted to respond to the persistence data that's seen. I think it's important to remember, as Jessica McNeil has said, there are differences in populations, and the backgrounds can make a difference to the actual results and the way you're presenting those results. And the approaches that are taken to show breadth of coverage or the response to vaccination antigen will perhaps make some kind of impact in that. Our approach has been to look at the response over time in a study that started in a number of countries very early, so we would have those data for you, and we'll continue to do that. But we look at the response over time, and we can expect to see the responses that are predicted in various populations. And if we look at our data that we have from a number of studies in different countries, in fact, the range of response that we get against those 4 strains, which are representative, are very, very consistent. And so the persistence data we have, we think will be consistent regardless of where you go look at that, and there will be that range.
Dr. Schuchat.
You know, the immunogenicity short-term results differed not just by country or study, but the populations were different ages. And I wonder within the studies if there were any age-related differences in the short-term immunogenicity. I think the UK had the highest results, but they were the older population. And since the committee's talking about this very wide age range, just wondering whether there's age-specific differences or were they not looked at?
I don't think specific age-related differences were looked at within the different populations. The reason that the UK study was included in the package insert was because it had data for older adolescents, whereas no other study was done in that age group. And the Canadian and Australian data was included as well for the younger age group because it was felt to be the most representative of US populations.
And Ms. Pellegrini.
A quick question and then a comment. The question first, I can't believe I don't know the answer to this, but does the Category B recommendation go onto the schedule? It does, okay. And then a comment. This debate right now is really crystallizing for me the challenges associated with some conversations that have also been happening in kind of the health policy world that I spend most of my time in, and that is the differences that exist in the types of data and that are necessary for FDA licensure versus an ACIP recommendation. And this is the hole that we are finding ourselves falling into right now. And I understand that this is a tremendous challenge for drug makers to try and prognosticate what that data is and how do they get it. But I think particularly with the potential, maybe more frequent use of FDA expedited pathways and alternative pathways for approval and things like that, this is going to be more and more of an issue with vaccines that we see in the future. And it's something that we may need to think about how to try and get our hands around, because it puts us in a terrible situation.
Thank you. Dr. Paradiso, and then Dr. Zahn.
Peter Paradiso, vaccine consultant, including with Pfizer. I just wanted to comment, this wasn't what I actually came up for, but I want to remind people that a composite response rate means that you respond to all of the strains that are tested. And so that's percent that responds to 3 or 4 strains. So if the response rate is 90%, and it's 90% to each strain, by the time you get to the 4th strain, it's 90% and 90% and 90% and 90%. So it's not going to be 90% to a composite, and just when you're looking at data. But what I really came up to say is that I'm hearing a little bit of push and pull here on the A and B category, where the leaning is towards a B category, and the hope is that people will still use the vaccine. And I hear questions about whether colleges will mandate the vaccine or recommend the use of the vaccine with a B category or not. And what I'm hearing is the hope is that they do. And yet the B category puts you in a situation where that's less likely to happen. And so I think you need to consider what you hope is going to happen post-vaccination. And I'm not sure I heard from the work what you hope is going to happen post-vaccination, whether you hope that's going to be cautious, minimal use, or whether you hope people are going to adopt it. Thank you.
Dr. Zahn?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple of questions about what this policy means, just in terms of how people would interpret it, because I think people have said Category B is a bit difficult to interpret, but then within this it says 16 to 18 is really the recommended, but then you can give it 16 to 23. So it's like 16 to 23, is that like B minus, and 16 to 18 is like B? And I guess, because I just think I'm just not sure how providers would interpret that. And I think the other comment I have is the short-term protection, I think is a little confusing to me too, because that to me implies that there is a short-term period of time when I should choose it. Like I should choose it when? Because it's certainly not going to cover that whole period of time. I think the goal is to let people be aware of the fact that the vaccine is not going to cover it for that long of a period of time. But that almost seems to me like an editorial opinion about, well, not an editorial, but the vaccine's not going to last for that long. I guess I don't always think of that being part of recommendations. And so I just think those various levels and parts of the recommendation, in addition to just the Category B part, makes it very difficult for a provider to interpret this information.
Dr. Rowley and then Dr. Baker.
So sort of following up on that last point. So I'm sitting here as the parent of one college-age child and one kid that's just finished college, and I am completely unclear about what the work group really expects the parent to do. So I'm going to go to a doctor, or my daughter's going to go to the doctor and say, I heard that there's this vaccine that's going to protect me from a deadly disease, and we are then going to rely on her PCP or pediatrician or whoever to give some kind of a value-based judgment about whether or not she should get this. You're going to kick it back to a 19-year-old who's then going to call her mother, who is just as confused. So I kind of feel like I understand A and B, I get it, I understand the reluctance and the lack of data, but I don't understand 100% what the work group intended.
Dr. Baker and then Dr. Harrison.
Well, I just have a comment as a work group member since 2003. We have the data that Jessica presented beautifully. It's one of the best presentations I've ever heard. Great job. We have that data, and I know that you're frustrated. We know it is protective short-term, looks like it for sure 2 years. That doesn't mean it won't last 10 or 5. We just don't know. So deadly disease, terrible cost-effective analysis with all the problems that they have, depending on what the assumed information is for an analysis. This is a licensed and available vaccine, and I agree with you, Dr. Riley, that an individual practitioner may have some difficulty in knowing all the innuendos to counsel you or one of your daughters, you know. But it will be available. It will be paid for in an equitable way. And I want somebody from CDC to answer the question that the individual doctor has, right? Don't you spend part of your time getting calls from physicians about vaccines? So if you're a huge HMO, there will be a big discussion about whether you'll even have this vaccine. But in the past, when it's a category B, AKA permissive, at least I can speak for pediatricians in practice and even smaller group practices than 1,000 physicians, they don't even carry category B vaccines in their office. And if they have somebody come in, yes, they'll counsel them, but they'll have to go someplace else to actually get vaccinated. I just want to comment that I get all the lack of data. We're all frustrated. It is what it is, but we have an FDA-approved vaccine. We have a bad disease. I think individuals should be at least allowed to have these vaccines paid for either by their private health insurance company or by VFC. I'm speaking not for the IDSA, but as an individual physician.
And just following that up, as we have shown fairly recently, ACIP can make changes in the recommendations and make so very quickly based on emerging information. Dr. Harrison.
Yeah, I think there is potential for inequity with a Category B recommendation, and I think the inequity is going to occur in terms of how knowledgeable or how much on the radar meningococcal disease is for your PCP. And so I think there will be inequities, and some will be offered the vaccine, some will not.
Dr. Campos-Edcoat.
Yeah, I think the fact that we now have a Category B recommendation is acknowledgement of the fact that as we go into the future with more vaccines against rare and rare diseases, we're not going to be able to recommend every vaccine for every person every time. And so we're going to have to get to an intermediate recommendation. I think a B is going to fill that need. The vaccine's available, people can get it, we want to make it equitable, but we're not convinced at this point in time every person should get it. I'm sitting here looking at numbers, and I am thankful for a B option here, because if all we had was an A option, I would be forced to vote against this vaccine. It would be an A against because of the numbers we're looking at. And I understand the individual impact, but there's individual impacts of other conditions. Let's just put this in perspective. If we vaccinated even half of this cohort at the cost we're talking about, we would be adding $2 billion to the vaccine for children's budget, possibly. The entire CDC budget is $7 billion. We have 30,000 deaths a year in this country from mental health-related diseases. And those affect people as well, including myself over this last year. 20 to 30,000 deaths a year in that category, in the same age category we're talking about. The entire budget for SAMHSA is $3.6 billion. We are going to exceed the entire budget for SAMHSA by adding this as a Category A recommendation for the number of deaths and sequelae that we're talking about. I think we really need to put this in perspective. The world is bigger than just vaccines and vaccine-preventable diseases. And so, to me, B is a good option here, particularly going forward to the future, where those who want it can get it. But at this point in time, we're not convinced, I'm not convinced, that this should be recommended for every person in this age group.
Thank you. Dr. Kimberlin.
Dr. Campos-Ocult, I think, raised some very good points. The only thing I would add is that, as I understand it, a Category B vote does encumber the dollars from VFC, assuming a VFC vote goes as well, toward that. So you still, if you're talking 50%, which for permissive might be about accurate, you still, assuming his numbers are correct, would be adding $2 billion or pulling $2 billion out of the VFC pot, so to speak. So I don't think a Category B gets you away from that. I think it's either a Category A recommended for all or it's not recommended. And sometimes the best thing to do is nothing, to, rather than just go out and do something, it's better just to sit and watch for a while.
Dr. Belanger.
I do see a benefit in a Category B recommendation because it acknowledges the fact that we don't have all the answers at this point. There are important questions remaining that need to be addressed, but by putting it out there, certainly usage will go up, and that will allow us to collect additional observational data to further assess the safety and the impact of the vaccine in the population. So I think, from that respect, nothing's ideal. I would love to be able to say this deserves to be a Category A recommendation, and even one death due to serogroup B is too many deaths. But we also have to acknowledge that we have a high burden also to make sure that we don't make recommendations that ultimately might be shown to have unanticipated harmful effects. And I think the jury is still out on some of these issues with this vaccine.
Dr. Rubin and then Dr. Hahn.
Yeah, I think I agree with the comments. I think a Category B is appropriate because fundamentally I think it's giving a message that there is potentially a balance between the benefits and risks of the vaccine that each decision maker should take into account. And wouldn't it be terrific in a subsequent meeting if we find that the vaccine is very safe, very effective, and effectiveness, not just bactericidal, effective, and we change that to a Category A. Or alternatively, we find that there's problems, there's limited effectiveness, and we withdraw the recommendation. I think that's why the Category B is probably appropriate at the present time.
Thank you. Dr. Hahn.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that with the Category A recommendation, one thing to consider is that many states will consider or actually make it mandated for school entry then. Right now, many states have, of course, a kindergarten entry and also 7th grade type requirement, so this would necessitate that. And I think with the lack of data, that would be a challenge to mandate it for school entry, but I think that conversation would happen and might promote some backlash.
Dr. Middleman.
Amy Middleman from the Society for Adolescent Health and Medicine. We'd just like to voice our support for a Category B recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I need to check my sheet. This Dr. Dweller?
Dwelly, yeah, ASTO. I was just doing some calculations, and I agree with Dr. Belanger that, I'm really concerned about the autoimmune factors here. I know the numbers are low, but when I look at the incidence of thyroiditis just in the United States, it ranges from 12.1 to 24 per 100,000. When you calculate that back to the 3,100 that were reported, we would expect a maximum of up to 0.74. I mean, we're 3 times that. And so I think that there is a question about, some of the safety of the vaccine as well.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Stinchfield.
Patsy Stinchfield from NAPNAP. I just want to also acknowledge how important the outbreak management portion of this use of this vaccine is, and that local public health and colleges are prepared in advance to use it. And I think education of clinicians, adolescents, and parents about the signs and symptoms of meningococcal disease and early recognition, early treatment, and then a prompt community response may be one of the most important things we do with this disease.
Thank you. Dr. Romero.
And I just want to follow that comment up with the fact that it's our responsibility as physicians to educate ourselves on the risks and benefits of these vaccines. We as physicians need to understand the risk of the disease, and make the recommendation as appropriate for the child. And we have a vaccine that works, then it should be our job to educate our colleagues and promote its use if it is a category B. We need to just move forward and get better education for physicians. It's the same with the HPV vaccine.
I'm seeing a lack of hands up right now, so I'm going to move into public comment here. A couple things here. I think we have 14 or 15 people signed up. I'm going to ask that we come up in groups of perhaps 5 so we don't have too much crowding at the microscope. It's been a busy day already. There has been just wonderful discussion so far, but if people can come up to the microphone in groups of 5, and please, just in terms of time, limit comments to about 3 minutes, and we'll just keep going until everyone has had their chance. The other thing, as people are coming up, and we have Dr. Stephen Black, Frankie Miley, Scott Parkhurst, Alicia Stillman, and I believe Mike Barnos coming up first. I'll just reemphasize that I believe we have about 40 plus letters now coming in. All the members of ASAP have received copies of the letters. There are a number that came in this morning that we will make sure we get distributed. In general, I'll just summarize because I can't even read the names of everybody. Most are coming from universities and colleges, but also some coming from large systems, from chancellors. We have student health, we have public health departments. We do have student government organizations overwhelmingly in favor of implementation of vaccine. A couple of note is one, just cautioning for all the reasons we've heard here, not to make it a routine recommendation, but to go slowly with this. And if I've missed any comment there, my apology. Also from the National Meningitis Association, I think they document with over 1,000 co-signatures, and from Meningitis Angels, a petition with, as of this morning, I believe 601 signatures. So all this information is getting around, but due to lack of time, I can't read them all, nor can I even cite all, but those will get around. So thank you very much, and Dr. Black.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Steve Black, and I've been a pediatric infectious disease specialist and vaccinologist for more than 30 years. And I guess I want to make 2 disclosures. I'm a consultant for GSK, Protein Sciences, Takeda, and WHO. And secondly, I really hate this disease. I've seen many children and adolescents who have died or whose lives have been ruined by meningococcal B disease, children and adolescents who are completely healthy and had the potential for long and happy, productive life. This disease changed my life also. I was a third-year pediatric medical student, and my first rotation was pediatrics. And one of the first patients I saw was a girl named Lori who had meningococcal sepsis and was admitted to the ward. And on the 3rd day of the hospitalization, the resident I was working with was walking to another hospital to take call and didn't show up. It was found dead on the sidewalk subsequently of meningococcal B disease. I think prior to that time, I was planning on being an echocardiographer, actually, and the first paper I ever published was a cardiology paper. But this disease really changed my life and made me want to go into infectious diseases. It's now more than 40 years later, and we now have the possibility of prevention of this disease. Since meningococcal B disease is rare, as we've heard, we're told that perhaps it's not cost effective to present the hundreds of cases that still occur in this country. And I think the people who say that, as was said by others, are considering these cases as numbers and not people. They're not seeing them as people and their families. They're not seeing the suffering associated with this disease and really the misery due to complications as well, not just deaths in terms of amputations, blindness, etc., that occurs. So cost effectiveness really, as has been said, and the great criteria provided, should not be considered alone as a criteria here for making decisions, I would hope. Additionally, cost-effective analyses that are performed prior to implementation really have not had a great historically predictive value. I was before this committee when the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine was considered, and at that time the cost per quality was $85,000 or $90,000 per quality-adjusted life year. And there were several people on the committee who said that this was really not a cost-effective prevention. And as we now know, after vaccine introduction, this is now one of the more cost-effective vaccines that we have. So I became a doctor to save lives, and I think that it's difficult to save lives one-on-one, especially with meningococcal B disease, where this evolves so rapidly. And it's sort of one of the greatest fears of pediatricians and parents is to miss a case of this disease, because once it commences, the risk of sequelae and mortality is so high. So I think the committee has an opportunity today to prevent these deaths, to prevent the suffering and loss of life potential in dozens of children each year. And I would urge the committee members to seize that opportunity and to routinely recommend this vaccine for children. Thank you.
Thank you. Frankie.
Hi, my name is Frankie Milley. I'm the mother of Ryan and the founder and national director of Meningitis Angels. Monday, 17 years ago, I carried my only child into an emergency room screaming he has meningitis. Within 2 hours, there was blood coming from every orifice of his body, and I watched him die a horrible death. The last words Ryan heard were from his dad. "Daddy loves you, baby boy." The last words Ryan said were, "I know." I will never be the parent at a college graduation. I will never dance with my son at his wedding. I will never hold a grandchild. And I won't have the care of a child in my old age. The stats that you have are not necessarily correct. And we know that because all the cases don't get reported because it costs money, and some hospitals and some health departments don't want to spend that money or don't have it to spend for those reports. We know that kids are misdiagnosed when they come into the emergency room, or they're given antibiotics, and once that antibiotic hits the bloodstream, it's no longer diagnosable necessarily. Ryan's cause of death was Frederickson's Waterhausen. On a 5th-day amended lab report, it was Group C, meningococcal. I've been coming to these ACIP meetings for 12 years. I've testified in almost all of them, almost 36 times. For a total of 108 minutes, I've been allowed to speak about my son and the importance of immunizing kids. In those 12 years, the working groups, the ACIP voting committee, and us old warriors that are here every time have come very far. We've left here celebrating and we've left here crying. One of the worst is when we had a vaccine to prevent meningococcal B in infants and we didn't get a recommendation for it. We still have parents calling us every day who have infants and children. Why can't we get our kids vaccinated? Why are our kids dying? Why is my child so mutilated? Why couldn't I get that vaccine? We know that permissive recommendations don't allow for education of the disease and the vaccine. We know in many cases there's no affordability or accessibility. We know that there's a hesitancy of physicians and healthcare providers to give it because it's really not recommended or it's permissive. We know that there's provider reimbursement problems with a permissive recommendation. One thing this does is really confuses parents about, is my child fully protected or are they not fully protected? One of my parents right here in Georgia sent her 17-year-old who's about to go to college this fall to her pediatrician to get her meningococcal B vaccine. Guess what? They gave her the conjugate again, the second one she's had in 2 years, because they don't know. They're not educated. There's no real information out there. We are still seeing outbreaks in Oregon, in the gay community, We're seeing outbreaks on college campuses. We're seeing random cases of adolescents. We still see toddlers and infants die with this disease or be left terribly mutilated. Again, I want to remind you, this to me is like having a ship that's sinking. You have 100 passengers, 100 life vests, and you only give out 50. And the other 50 people on that boat drowned as they watched their life vests hanging in the closet. How many tears do we have to cry? And how many children and young adults have to be debilitated or die before we make this and we do the right thing and just stop this disease? I want to remind each and every one of you that look at stats. I know you have to do that, but each one of those stats, each one of those cases represents somebody's child, somebody's life. Represents a child or a young adult who's lost limbs, faces, or blind, or deaf, and live a really hard life. Represent parents who have gone through divorce and financial and social ruin in their lives. Some of them watch their kids every day who suffer from seizures and all kinds of problems and never know if the next day their child's going to wake up or not. This is the life that I live with all of our families. Each one of those numbers that you talk about represents somebody's child. Just remember that. So, you know, permissive recommendation. I'm disappointed. You know, I'd like to think it's a real step forward, but unfortunately, I think it's going to cause a lot more confusion in our world and among parents and physicians and payers. Thank you to the committee for your dedication and your hard work. I know that you don't have an easy job. I know you're all parents and grandparents. Dr. Temte, I especially wanted to say to you, you've been an amazing leader, and thank you for your care and your kindness and consideration of all of us.
Thank you. Mr. Parkhurst.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak. Hi, my name is Scott Parkhurst. I'm from Portland, Oregon. My youngest of two sons, Jacob, was a 17-year-old junior in high school. Jake was an A student and was a member of the high school swim team. He also enjoyed snowboarding, golfing, and riding motorcycles. He was my mini-me. Jake would have graduated high school a few weeks ago, but that was all taken away from him last year. It tears me up seeing his classmates enjoying graduation and getting ready to head off to college. This should have been one of Jake's shining moments. 15 months ago, on a Sunday afternoon, Jacob said he didn't feel well, and by Monday morning, he was in the emergency room. The ER doctor pulled Jake's mom and I aside and informed us that Jake may not survive and appears to have bacterial meningitis. I told Jake to fight for his life, which he nodded back to me okay, as he was taken off into intensive care and put in a medically induced coma. That was the last contact I ever had with Jake. By Tuesday morning, the doctors ran an EEG to check his brain activity. And at that point, they determined he was brain dead. In 36 hours, my son was dead. Cause of death, bacterial meningitis, serogroup B. Every day, almost every hour, I have thoughts of Jake. A lot of times it hurts real bad, especially when I hear of another person becoming sick with meningitis. I end up reliving the final tragic moments of Jake's life. This has affected everyone in my family. We have had to deal with depression, marriage counseling, alcohol, drug use, and rehab, to name a few. It completely turns your world upside down. My oldest son, Jeff, was heading to OSU in September and planned to live in a dorm. We were all terrified of him possibly contracting meningitis. Thanks to Alicia Stillman and her interview on the Today Show, I followed her lead and took Jeff to Canada to get the serogroup B vaccination. We shouldn't have to take our children to other countries to get vaccines. The most recent outbreak at U of O has hit home, as this is my home state, and I have lots of friends and family that have children attending U of O. Fortunately, they have all been vaccinated, But at this time, only half the student body has been vaccinated, and it's been over 5 months. The previous permissive recommendation doesn't cut it. It creates an inequality and just creates a lot of confusion, and I just don't feel that's effective. I understand this disease only affects a small percentage of the population, but when it's your son, daughter, grandchild, cousin, niece, or friend, it's 100%. I don't think anyone here who has children would want to lose their child to something that is preventable. I strongly encourage the panel to make a routine recommendation and stop the spread of this deadly, debilitating disease. Jake didn't get that chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stillman.
So I am Alicia Stillman, and I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I'm here as Emily Stillman's mother, and I'm also here as the founder and the director of the Emily Stillman Foundation. This is my Emily. She's 19 years old, forever. She's beautiful, she's talented, she's smart, and she was a 19-year-old college sophomore. Emily was not a part of an outbreak. She was a one. That's all she had was a headache. She called me one night, I have a headache. I said, why do you think you have a headache? I'll bet you're coming down with the flu. She says, no, Mom, I was up all night studying for 2 big tests, but don't worry, I did good. I said, great, so take a couple Motrin, and we'll see how you feel in the morning. The morning never came. By the time I was called back to the hospital the next day and told to get en route immediately, Emily was in a coma. I never saw these gorgeous eyes open. I never saw her look at me, tell me she loved me, ever again. My favorite thing about Emily was when she would hug with her whole body. It wasn't like limp arms around you. And now when I want to hug, it's a cold stone. This is what I hug when I hug my daughter now. Emily happened to have been my daughter, but she could have been any of your daughters. She could have been any of your grandchildren. She could be your next door neighbor. She wasn't a number. She was a person with a future, a wonderful future ahead of her. Last weekend, Emily would have graduated from college. So instead of being here today, listening to B, A, permissive, not permissive, are we going to let kids get protected? Are we going to let parents protect their families? I should be moving my daughter to a new city to start her life. Would she be starting grad school? Would she be on the stage? Would she be starting a new job? And instead, I am begging you to protect our kids, to give parents the ability to vaccinate their children with the vaccine that would have protected my daughter. I made my daughter a promise when I said goodbye to her, and I promised her I would be her voice. I promised her, I don't know how this could happen. You were protected. I did everything I was told to do. But I will figure out how this could happen, and I will make sure it doesn't happen to other people. And when I formed the Emily Stillman Foundation, that was my mission, and that's what I did. And yes, before our FDA approved those vaccines, I schlepped busloads to Canada, and I protected whole families in Canada with this vaccine. And now we have it here, and I field phone calls and emails all day long from parents all over the country who can't get their hands on this vaccine. Their doctors say they don't even know that there's one approved. They don't even know it's approved. That's what they tell them. Oh, but don't worry, your kid doesn't need it. So with a permissive vaccine, who will pay for it? Who will carry it? I worry about that. I worry that in 2015, we're going to become communities of have and have-nots, and knowledge knowledge-nots, and that's not okay. I have letters here that I know you've all seen in my folder. from every university in the state of Michigan. University of Michigan, Michigan State, Kalamazoo College, Wayne State School of Medicine, Central, Northern, Eastern, Western. I know you've all seen them. They all want their campuses protected. Emily isn't a number. A 1 doesn't matter. When it's your child, a 1 might as well be a million. And I'll close just by telling you that in Judaism, we are taught to save 1 life is like saving the whole world. And you are taxed with that. You are taxed with that today. So please, save the 1 and save the world.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes.
My name is Mike Barnes, and I am here today as a representative of the National Meningitis Association. I'm joined by my wife, Charlene, and my daughter, Kendall. We lost our 20-year-old son, Jimmy, to Serogroup B meningococcal disease this March. He went to the ER on a Monday with a terrible headache, neck pain, and high fever. He was told it was the flu and sent home. He was gone in 28 hours. He was not a college student living in a dorm, and his story was not covered by the media, so I'm here to share it with you today. He was, however, we thought, fully vaccinated, including with the meningitis vaccine. Charlene and I were not able to have our own kids. It took many years, but eventually we were able to adopt Jimmy when he was 3 days old. 5 years later, we adopted our daughter, Kendall. We had the perfect family. We had a great life. Jimmy was a great kid. He was always joking and smiling. Everyone liked him. He had a million friends. As a parent, it seemed as if childhood lasts forever, but those teenage years fly by. First, he's struggling with homework. Next, he's learning to drive and applying to college. Jimmy chose Colorado State University to be near skiing, but he found the workload overwhelming and decided to return home to New Jersey. We were glad to have him back. Shortly after his return, our family moved to Florida. He loved the beach life, and he made a million friends, just like he always had. Jimmy and Kendall were always very close. They were so protective of each other. They loved each other very much. They were more than brother and sister. They were good friends. Kendall will feel this loss for the rest of her life. There are now so many things I don't have to worry about anymore, like when he's coming home at night, or what kind of job he'll get, or if he's getting enough sleep. I don't know what kind of man he would have turned out to be. I won't be able to bounce his kids on my knee or take them to the beach. I can never hug him or tell him I love him ever again. Jimmy made our world a brighter place. His light is out, and we wonder if the world will ever be as bright again. In my family, among my 2 children, the incidence of Men B was 50%. For Jimmy, it was 100%. Today, you have the ability to make sure no other parent has to stand here and share a story of how their son or daughter died. On behalf of my son, Jimmy, who is no longer here, I implore you to extend the current vaccine recommendations for adolescents to include a vaccine to prevent meningitis B. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I'm going to invite Ms. Jane, Ms. Seltzer, I believe Ms. Ross, Ms. Bozoff, and Mr. Marcio to the microphone. I'm going to take the prerogative. ACIP has public comment by people in person. We had a request to make a telephone comment. After running it past Masso and so on, we felt that this is not doable just with the enormous audience we tend to have. I did, when we were working this out with this individual, said that I would read a letter into the record. And so My apology to anyone who feels that this is unfair, but this is kind of the intermediate step. This is coming from the National Vaccine Information Center and Teresa Rangham. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment today. Founded in 1982, the nonprofit National Vaccine Information Center advocates for the institution of vaccine safety and informed consent protections in public health policy and laws. We support the availability of all preventive health care options, including vaccines, and the right of consumers to make educated voluntary health care choices. Meningococcal disease is devastating for those stricken, and the public has the right to use MenB vaccines. As the committee considers routinely recommending MenB vaccines, please consider the following information. The current U.S. population estimated to be over 321 million, and according to CDC, meningococcal disease in the U.S. ranges from 800 to 1,200 cases annually. A third of these cases are serogroup B, with 60% serogroup B cases occurring in children too young to benefit from the MenB vaccines. The CDC also has acknowledged that humans are the only natural reservoir for N. meningitis, and that children grow into adulthood, the vast majority have bactericidal antibodies against this disease. Accordingly, a CDC report published in 2000 revealed that routine recommendation of meningococcal vaccines for college freshmen living in dormitories was not cost effective. The report stated it would take 300,000 to 500,000 doses of vaccine annually to prevent 15 to 30 cases of disease and 1 to 3 deaths. The cost were $600,000 to $1.8 million to prevent 1 case of disease and $7 to $20 million to prevent 1 death. Although this report precedes licensure of MenB vaccines, MenB vaccine cost-effectiveness findings would be similar. Because ACIP's routine recommendation often translates into legal vaccine mandates in many states, choice and recommendation versus vaccine requirements were unifying themes noted in CDC's 2011 stakeholder report on meningococcal vaccines. We have listened with deep sympathy to the experiences shared by parents whose children and family have been devastated by invasive meningococcal disease. During ACIP meetings and the CDC's 2011 public engagement on meningococcal vaccines, some parents and their healthcare providers did not make themselves aware of meningococcal vaccine availability. These parents have a right to know about the benefits and risks and availability of meningococcal vaccines so they can make an informed decision for their children. However, with regard to ACIP recommending that all children get MenB vaccines, the data is clear that a universal use recommendation is not justified. It would have far-reaching consequences that will be costly and unnecessarily burdensome to parents and the government, adults and government agencies. NVIC respectfully requests ACIP to vote against MenB vaccine universal use recommendation. We encourage the ACIP and CDC to revisit stakeholder report and need for greater flexibility in ACIP recommendations, and that comes in at 3 minutes. Thank you, and we will move on with Ms. Chain. And if not available, Ms. Seltzer.
Hi, my name is Lori Stelzer, and I'm a representative for the National Meningitis Association. In October 2014, I lost my smart, funny, confident, and very healthy 18-year-old daughter, Sarah, to serogroup B meningococcal disease. She called us from her school in San Diego, California, complaining of flu-like symptoms. The next morning, her severe headache prompted her to go to the ER. We got there in 3 hours, but she was already in the ICU, on a ventilator, and in a coma. And by that evening, they thought she was brain dead. She died from serogroup B meningococcal disease just a few days later. Sarah donated her organs to save the lives of others. Sarah loved to laugh and sing. Even though she only sang in the car, she surprised us and auditioned to sing at her high school graduation. She chose the song, "I'll Stand By You," and brought a stadium of people to their feet. She was just beginning her life, and we expected a great future for her. Serogroup B meningococcal disease stole that from her. No mother should have to bury a child. It's just not the right order of things. If one fewer child dies of this preventable disease, that would be a very strong legacy for Sarah. I took her for all her recommended vaccines. We got everything they told us to do. At that time, serogroup B vaccines were not available. They were not approved, but they are now. It would be devastating for one other child to lose their life knowing that it could be avoided. You have the opportunity to prevent other families from going through what we went through. The available vaccines to protect against serogroup B, meningococcal disease, must be recommended broadly for all adolescents, just as the A, C, W, and Y vaccines have been. This disease destroys families and lives. Protecting our children against all strains of this life-shattering disease is really the right thing to do.
Thank you. Is it Jackie Ross?
Yeah. I'm just going to thank you for the opportunity to let me speak today. My name is Jackie Ross, and I'm the sister of Stephanie Ross, the Drexel University student who died from meningitis B in March of 2014. My sister was awesome, smart, funny, and compassionate. But I'm here representing the National Meningitis Association. I'm here to do what I can to prevent the kinds of losses that so many of us have had to endure. My parents spoke to you in October. On behalf of my parents and also on behalf of all of Stephanie's and my own college classmates who want to be protected from the devastating effects of all of the meningococcal strains, I'm asking you to please make a broad vaccination recommendation. Since December, my parents have worked to get me the serogroup B vaccine. This was no easy task. It took many phone calls and emails between them, the vaccine manufacturers, my pediatrician, various pharmacies, and even the Department of Public Health. I was finally able to get vaccinated just last week. But the process took nearly 6 months, and it only occurred because our pediatrician finally thought to recommend that we look into a travel vaccination clinic. My parents also tried to get the vaccine through several pharmacies. Most did not have access to it, and those that could get it did not have anyone on staff that could administer it, so ordering it would not have mattered. My parents should not have to work, or parents should not have to work this hard to get an FDA-approved vaccine to protect their children. When you've lost a family member, you go the extra mile to do what it takes to protect your family. My fear is that a lot of people will feel uncomfortable not getting the vaccine through their doctor, or that there will not be enough outlets for everyone to get vaccinated. Without a broad recommendation from you today, doctors won't recommend that young adults be vaccinated against this deadly threat. That would be a terrible thing that would sadly only be reversed after more people, like my sister, suffer the devastating effects of serogroup B meningitis. In the span of a few hours, I lost my only sister, my mentor, and my best friend. I don't want that to happen to anyone else.
I think you mispronounced my name before. It was Jaime, so yeah. So my name's Lucy. I'm here as a representative for the National Meningitis Association, and I'm here because my sister passed away 9 months ago. My sister's name was Andrea. And she was one of those kids who excelled at everything. From a very young age, she won awards at schools, played sports, and still somehow managed to have a social life. Like most college-bound kids, her first question when she got into Georgetown's pre-med program was, how am I going to afford this? It turns out she didn't have to worry about it because she was awarded the Gates Millennial Scholarship, but Georgetown actually offered her a full ride. So she had a lot of potential, and she would have been an amazing doctor. On September of her sophomore year, after a few days of feeling sick and being misdiagnosed as having a viral infection, she was found in her dorm room in a coma and unresponsive. The next day, my sister passed away from serogroup B meningococcal disease. She was 19. Seeing my sister in a coma was one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever had. And I remember begging her to wake up, and I stayed with her when they finally took her off life support until the end. The only way I know how to describe losing her is like trying to breathe with just one lung. I struggle every single day. But it's been 9 months, and I still struggle to move forward with my life, and so do my parents. I'm so glad there's a vaccine now, but it won't save lives unless it's used. As a college student who is not aware of this disease and just assumed my sister and I were protected, I know that unless a doctor specifically recommends a vaccine, college students are unlikely to get it or know to ask about it. It was Andrea's dream to help people as a doctor, and making sure that other people get vaccinated would mean she did just that. Please make sure no one else has to go through the heartbreak that our family has gone through, and provide a broad recommendation for this vaccine. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bozoff.
I'm Lynn Bozoff, president of the National Meningitis Association. Many of you have heard me talk about losing my son, Evan, to meningococcal disease 17 years ago, and it doesn't get any easier. About a month ago, my younger son, Ryan, who's a physician in Atlanta, called on his way to the ER with a 104.5 fever and the worst headache imaginable. You all know what I thought. Ryan is fine, but for a few hours, all I could think of was, I can't go through this again. I can't lose another child to meningococcal disease. It was a horrible deja vu. Meningococcal disease has scarred my life forever. 17 years ago, I didn't know the devastation that this disease could wreak, but I know now. In my role with the National Meningitis Association, I see and I hear it daily. You've already heard from a number of advocates who know it all too well, from siblings who have not only lost their best friend, but have lost part of their parents who are going to be forever grieving the loss of a child, from parents who bravely soldier on and share their stories so that this doesn't happen to any other family. And for our survivors who bear their physical and emotional scars with grace and dignity. A handful of our adolescent survivors have submitted written testimony, and it's in your packets, and there are copies on the back table for everyone to see. About 2 weeks ago, NMA issued an open letter and invited people who had been affected by meningococcal disease or who were interested in broad MenB recommendations to sign an open letter. As of this morning, we have almost 1,240 signatures from all 50 states. It's been an overwhelming response. We have gotten so many touching, heartbreaking comments from MenB families I didn't know existed. We've captured about 20 of them. They're in your packets. There's also a link if you want to read all of them, and there will be copies on the back table. You have the power to prevent other families from going through this. We can protect our children. We need to protect our children. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marcio.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Andy Marceau. I'm a meningitis survivor. I'm here on my own time and my own dime, and I have no conflicts. Last time I was here, I was wearing a suit, but honestly, it's really hard for me to tie a tie anymore. And plus, I thought it was kind of important that all of you see what my arms look like now, because they didn't always look like this. So y'all remember last year when there was this really awful infectious disease going around and all kinds of people were really clamoring for a vaccine? Remember Ebola? Well, what I found interesting about the Ebola scare is that meningococcal B infections are far more prevalent in the United States. They're more contagious. They have a similar fatality rate in the US, and generally speaking, they kill people more quickly than Ebola does. So based on the general US public's reaction to Ebola, I think it's pretty safe to say that if all Americans understood the gravity of meningococcal B infections, there would be even more people backing me up here as I urge all of you to adopt a broad vaccination recommendation, a Category A recommendation. Unfortunately, most people don't know how afraid of this disease they should be. I know because 11 years ago, I went from a perfectly healthy college student to almost dead within 24 hours. And then I spent 4 months in a hospital having my skin debrided and parts of my limbs amputated. As I told you all a few months ago, the first year of my medical bills were almost $2 million. That's just for the initial year, $2 million. That would have bought a lot of vaccines, right? And that doesn't even account for the year of work that my parents missed and that I missed as I was recovering, nor for the ongoing medical costs that I've had every year since. I've been fortunate to have health insurance, but I've basically maxed out my out-of-pocket every single year, and I probably will for most of my life. I've accepted that. So, again, I know there's concerns about the cost of these vaccines, but I hope you're accounting for all of the costs of not vaccinating, and you're also accounting for the cost burden and who bears the cost burden. Is it society at large, or is it just families like mine? To this point, we've gotten off the hook for a lot of medical expenses due to meningococcal B infections because about 15% of those who get them die quickly, which saves us money. But as critical care continues to improve, how many of those people will survive, but survive with costly, lifelong injuries like mine? We also know that every year more and more Americans move from rural areas into cities. Isn't it logical that we'll see more outbreaks of this disease as more people cluster together in population centers? We're already seeing an outbreak right now in Chicago, for instance. Your meningococcal B vaccine recommendation for college campuses has already proven ineffective. As we saw at the University of Oregon, it takes weeks or months to ramp up a mass vaccination campaign. If you wait until a second or third case before you start, you're just inviting unnecessary deaths in the interim. At Oregon, it was the fourth case that proved fatal. Meanwhile, you have an entirely different recommendation for the quadrivalent vaccines, which is confusing and frankly paints you into a bit of a corner. These new vaccines prevent the same disease with the same horrible effects as the quadrivalent. The data shows they're safe and effective. If you hand down lesser recommendations for these new vaccines, we will know that it's strictly for economic reasons, so that the government and the insurance companies can save a few dollars. But will the government or insurance companies compensate families who lose unvaccinated loved ones to this disease? Will they compensate families like mine? And how would that change the economic equation if they were forced to? As we've heard, England now has meningococcal B vaccines in its national health program, meaning any British citizen can walk into any doctor's office and get the shot without paying a dime out of pocket. They found a way to afford that. Why can't we? And by the way, their government negotiated with the drug companies for a price of 20 British pounds per shot. And unless I'm doing the currency exchange way wrong, that's a lot less than 400 American. So with all due respect, I think your cost effectiveness study is bunk, and you should pretty much just disregard it. If you hide behind that as a reason for some lack of recommendation, I think that's going to be pretty cowardly. Are you going to set up another situation like we had when we were waiting on FDA approval, in which Americans are second-class citizens globally when it comes to preventative health care? Americans used to lead the world on scientific issues. When JFK said, we're going to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade, he didn't then say, but only if it's cost-effective. When Jonas Salk was developing the polio vaccine, I don't think he ever said, gee, I sure hope the cost of this shot is offset by what it saves in medical costs, otherwise this will all be for naught. No, they said we're going to send a man to the moon, we're going to wipe out polio, and they did it, and they inspired an entire generation of scientists. I don't hear a whole lot of that boldness from this panel today. What I hear is a lot of fear and a lot of hedging. I hear a lot of doctors who seem to want people to be vaccinated, but don't want to take the responsibility for being the one to tell them to get vaccinated. I need your help. Since I survived meningitis, part of my purpose in life has been to make sure others don't get it. So I've spoken to as many school groups as will have me, and I've testified in several different state legislatures. That's why I wrote a book. Every time I hear about another person getting ill with this disease, it strikes me right in my chest. What if I had done more? What if I had talked to more people? Maybe my warnings would have reached that person. Maybe that person would have gotten vaccinated or not shared that bacteria-ridden cup or recognized the symptoms and gotten to the hospital in time. Surviving this disease gave me a terrible responsibility to talk about it almost every day for the last 11 years.
To relive the panic, the debridements, skin grafts, the amputations, the emotional anguish of watching my body disintegrate at age 22. You can help me with this responsibility. You can put this vaccine in every health insurance plan and every pediatrician's office in America. I believe this is why I went through that pain. I went through all of that so I could be here today in front of you, pleading for you to help me make sure others don't go through it. Please don't let me down.
Thank you very much for the comment. We have Lee Luckroth. Yeah. And again, I hate doing this, but my gentle reminder for about 3 minutes per comment. Thank you.
Sure. Well, it's a hard act to follow. Greetings from Kansas. I'm Dr. Leah Luckroth, and I am here speaking on my own behalf as a mother, friend, and a physician. And I have absolutely no conflicts. 11 years ago, Andy Marso presented to Watkins Health Services at the University of Kansas, carried in by 2 of his friends due to extreme pain in his extremities. I was getting ready to leave the building for lunch when I received a call from one of our nurses concerned about a student who had just arrived. I walked into the treatment clinic and knew immediately that this was an emergency when I saw the dusky, cyanotic color of Andy's skin. I placed my hand on his forearm, seeing for the first time the rash of meningococcemia. It was more frightening than the pictures I had seen in textbooks. Andy, who is a National Merit Scholar and on track to graduate #1 in his class in the School of Journalism in May, was still coherent and answered my questions as I asked the nurse to call 911. In less than 10 minutes, the ambulance had arrived. One physician was talking to Andy's friend Clay about close contacts. Another physician was talking to Andy's father in Minnesota, and I had reviewed his case with the infectious disease specialist at our local hospital. Time was of the essence. This deadly disease strikes without warning. I can remember taking my dose of Cipro and trembling as I felt that Andy would not survive the night. I hugged my 2 daughters closely that evening, realizing with a jolt of reality that this student could have easily been my child. Over the ensuing hours and days, there would be meetings at Andy's scholarship hall where he lived, with the campus newspaper students that he worked with on a daily basis, his soccer buddies, and an email would be sent campus-wide from the chancellor. The university would later adopt a policy mandating the meningitis ACYNW vaccine for all students living on campus. Andy lost most of his fingers and part of his feet, but stands tall today as a miracle and advocate for the prevention of meningitis. He continues to educate medical professionals and the public about the disease. Now that more people than ever have viable health insurance that puts prevention first, we have the opportunity to save lives with a simple vaccine. This past week, my daughter received her first dose of the meningitis B vaccine before she travels to college in August. 11 years later, I felt that jolt of reality, knowing how fortunate my daughter was to have this option that did not exist for Andy. Please do the right thing and approve this vaccination for prevention of meningitis in all adolescents and college students and everyone else. There is no dollar amount that could ever replace Andy or any student. Prevention and education are the key factors to lowering the cost of health care. I agree with what Andy said. I don't have a business degree, but if it only costs $50 in Europe and it costs $400 here, certainly we can get an MBA to help us with the price. I am thankful to be here today as an advocate for meningitis B prevention and as part of Andy's amazing life story. Thank you.
Thank you. I have,
Mara Berger from Chicago, Illinois.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any affiliation yet. but I'm a grieving mother. Thank you. Can you hear me? In 2005, the FDA licensed and approved the conjugate Menactra for routine use in 9-month to 55-year-olds. The FDA said, after thorough research, that the vaccine is effective, safe, and immunogenic. However, at that time, your predecessors of the ACIP committee didn't recommend the vaccine per the FDA's approval. Instead, the ACIP prioritized and gave the vaccine approval and recommendation for adolescents only. To date, there is still no recommendation for 9-month-olds to 55-year-olds. Now, the CDC does take care of the children and the young adults and adolescents. But what about the adults, 21 to 55, who die or get maimed from this insidious disease, the strain C, with sepsis, Neisseria meningitis C, and septicemia? The CDC does not recommend the vaccine to adults, healthy adults, in their literature. My son Adam was a beautiful human being. I took him into an emergency room thinking he had the flu. I've read this so many times on the internet. The emergency room doctors must be retrained, and the nurses. They know nothing about meningococcal disease. Everything they do, they only focus on, it's the flu. We went in the morning, he had 104 fever. They told us it's the flu. We went home, and when we returned, he had the most virulent headache. The triage nurse told us to go home. It's the flu. There's nothing they can do. I threw a big stink. They were mad at me because I wouldn't stop saying, we're staying. I don't care what you say, we're staying. They made my son wait 5 hours in the emergency room where he could have infected everyone because he was so contagious. When he was finally seen, they gave him the antibiotic because he had septicemia. Now, I did not know, I've heard of meningitis, but I didn't really know anything about meningococcal disease. Well, I studied it and researched it. And I would challenge any infectious disease doctor here on my knowledge versus theirs. I can't believe that for 10 years this vaccine has been approved by the FDA, and the ACIP committees have not recommended the vaccine. Do you think that healthy people, adults, don't get this vaccine? I mean, this disease? It's the healthy people that get the disease because they don't have enough antibodies to protect themselves. Plus, he was a nursing student at a prestigious private hospital. He thought he got the recommended vaccines. Come to find out after his death, he didn't get a meningitis vaccine because the private hospital follows the CDC's recommendations that only epidemiologists should get the vaccine. Aren't hospitals full of bacteria? Sick patients come in with meningococcal disease? Do you know how many firemen, emergency staff, paramedics have gotten the disease from a patient they've transported to hospitals? I believe that adults 21 to 55 are at most risk. A friend of mine, she's 50 years old, she went to her doctor. She said, "Do I need a meningitis vaccine?" "Oh, no, you don't live in a dorm." That's the mindset of many doctors. Since the vaccine is not recommended for adults, doctors don't keep up on the information about meningococcal disease, and they talk foolish. I can go into Walgreens right now and get a Menactra shot. I don't have to ask anybody. As long as the FDA approved it and licensed it, we really don't need your recommendation. The only way we need reason we need your recommendation is so that the insurance companies pay for the vaccine. I'm lucky. I have Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they pay for the vaccine whether you recommend it or not. But in the meantime, people are dying. The ACIP committee has an obligation to stop the disease at any cost. Controlling outbreaks is not eradication. The only eradication is vaccine. You have to educate the public from preschool to grad school. The parents, the children, the nursing staff, the colleges, anyone should be able to get this vaccine, even staff at schools. Recommended routinely, the way the FDA intended 10 years ago. There have been thousands of maimings and death, and you've turned a blind eye. I don't get it.
I don't want to interject, but if we can bring it to a close so we have time for the remaining speakers. Thank you.
I implore you that the ACIP and the CDC have to come together and approve this Menactra for the ACY and 135 as soon as possible. This disease is not rare. It's sporadic all over the country. 1 here, 2 there. Please act accordingly and responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Wexler.
Hi, I'm Dr. Deborah Wexler. Can you hear me all right? Executive Director of the Immunization Action Coalition. IAC is proud to receive funding from CDC, almost all vaccine companies, individuals, coalitions, and more. I'm here today because I've attended ACIP meetings for more than 15 years and have witnessed hours of discussion as the committee strives to determine the right thing to do in protecting the health of the nation. And it's within this context that I offer the following reasons for you to support a routine recommendation for MenB vaccine. First, for simplicity and clarity. ACIP has recommended the use of meningococcal vaccine against serotypes A, C, W, and Y for 10 years. How can we justify doing less for serogroup B? In addition, having a routine recommendation for one meningococcal vaccine and a permissive recommendation for the other is unnecessarily confusing for both parents and providers. Parents may erroneously think that their vaccinated children are protected from meningitis, when in reality they have been vaccinated against only ACW and Y. A routine recommendation for MenB would be simpler to follow and would alleviate confusion for everyone concerned. Second, it was my understanding that insurance is unlikely to pay for a vaccine which lacks a routine ACIP recommendation, which would create a two-tiered approach to disease prevention. I've learned here today that perhaps VFC would cover this vaccine if it were a permissive recommendation, but it still concerns me that private insurance may not cover and HMOs may not cover the vaccine because it's a permissive recommendation. And if it's not on the CDC immunization schedule, the vaccine may not even be discussed unless a knowledgeable parent brings it up. And third is cost, and the people here who have spoken before me have been so eloquent on this topic. Ironically, cost is a consideration both in support of and in opposition to a routine recommendation. ACIP tends to focus on the high cost of the vaccine per case prevented. But what about the cost to a parent whose child has died from a preventable disease? And what is the cost to a young adult of having one or more limbs amputated or having other lifelong disabilities from a preventable disease? And what are the costs, both in dollars and the emotional toll, for colleges and communities dealing with an outbreak of a preventable disease? These concepts also must be factored into any discussion of cost. As public health professionals, we are all dedicated to prevention. I know that you, as ACIP members, are charged with making recommendations that balance difficult and seemingly competing objectives. But to me, the answer is clear. I choose prevention, and I ask you to choose a routine recommendation to protect all teens with MenB vaccine. You have the power to prevent a deadly and devastating disease that can have an overwhelming impact on young people and all the people who love them, as we have just heard. A routine recommendation is quite simply the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this Ms. LaFalaise?
Can you hear me? Thank you. So first, I'd like to take a moment to share my deepest respects and condolences with the families, or for the families and the survivors that have shared their stories with us today. So thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kamei LaFalaise, representing the National Consumers League, and I have no conflicts of interest to declare. Based in Washington, D.C., the National Consumers League is the nation's oldest consumer advocacy organization, founded in 1899, and provides the consumer perspective on matters that affect consumers, including health-related issues. In February, the National Consumers League's executive director, Sally Greenberg, stood before this committee urging it to add serogroup B meningococcal, or MenB, vaccines to the routine schedule of vaccinations. We are here today to echo that same message before more lives are needlessly lost to this devastating disease. Making safe and effective medications and healthcare widely available to all Americans has been a long-standing priority to NCL. We recently conducted a survey of parents to explore attitudes, behaviors, and misconceptions regarding vaccines. Among other things, we found 5 significant points that I'll share with you today. First, a majority of adults, 87%, support mandatory vaccinations for school-aged children. Second, 81% of parents find healthcare providers to be a trusted source of vaccine information. Third, about 30% of parents still believe that vaccinations can cause autism, which demonstrates a critical need to educate the public and strengthen our message. Fourth, 84% of parents cite protecting a child from disease as the top reason to vaccinate, followed by protecting family from disease, helping to eliminate the disease, and lastly, protecting the community from disease. Fifth, and finally, of all childhood diseases, parents are most concerned about meningitis. Not only do these findings highlight that there is an ongoing need for vaccine education, but that Americans see vaccines as a way to protect our children and community from disease. And they take very seriously the threat of meningitis. A routine or Category A recommendation for the MenB vaccines would allow for patient education about the disease and the availability of this new vaccine before an outbreak occurs. Because of the highly contagious nature of the disease and its debilitating effects, including loss of limbs and death, the vaccine to prevent MenB would be available to all parents and children, not just those who are aware of the vaccine and specifically request it, or those who can pay out-of-pocket costs. You have heard powerful testimony today from several people afflicted by this frightening disease. If we wait, it could be too late. How many lives need to be lost before we take preventative action? We see no reason to expose anyone to this terrible illness when complete protection and prevention is available. Once again, NCL believes that parents and young people should have access to these 2 FDA-approved vaccinations before a deadly outbreak occurs, and therefore, both vaccines should be added to the routine schedule. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. We still have a Neil Reisman signed up. Is he here? And I believe that is
Good morning. My name is Neil Reisman. In 2005, I was the father of 2. Today, I'm the father of 1. On the morning of September 27th, my youngest, my son Isaac, woke with a headache and was dead of meningitis by 4:30 the same day. I found his body. He had died less than 12 hours from the time he had told us he had a headache until he died. A vaccine would have prevented his death. It's an epidemiological story you all know too well, but it's a personal story I never wanted to know. Today I'm here as a spokesperson for the Global Health Living Foundation. Together we're asking this committee to endorse the FDA labeling recommendation for broad immunization to prevent the invasive disease, death, and physical devastation caused by meningitis serogroup B, especially for individuals 10 through 25 years of age. My appearance here today in your committee meeting could not come at a more immediate time. Lauren Jones at the University of Oregon added her name to the list of those who have died of meningitis. A UC Davis student was also diagnosed in February, and others in Tennessee, Washington, D.C., and Rhode Island. These schools now see the need for a vaccine to be available to all their students, not just the ones who can afford it. Since the FDA approved the vaccine for meningitis strain B in November 2014, there have been over 50 cases of meningitis strain B. Did they get infected because the ACIP didn't act to make the vaccine available to all? Perhaps. Although the vaccine was available to those who could afford to pay for it, without your recommendation, as you know, insurance companies and Medicaid won't cover the cost. It's not difficult to conclude that informed people with the money to pay for the vaccine have lived, and those who can't afford it or don't even know about it have been infected. This is counter to everything the ACIP, the CDC, the FDA, and the United States stand for. Your endorsement vote for the FDA recommendation would realign this committee with its mission, with the values and expectations of parents with college-age children. We expect the government to tell us when the health of our children is in danger and then help us decide what to do. Because meningitis is nearly always fatal or at least physically devastating, the low number of people affected masks the toll these cases take on families such as mine and on communities. My job today is to help you understand the depth of the emptiness we parents feel every day and the heartache we feel for those parents who are about to join our ranks, the ranks of families -1. Please act so other young people and their families are not so violently affected by meningitis. Let there not be another Lauren Jones or an Isaac Reisman, my son, who died of meningitis. You can do this, and I urge you to do so today. As for cost-benefit analysis, what's the cost of a life, and what's the benefit of an early death?
I'd like to thank all the public commenters on sharing what must be very difficult stories. We appreciate your heartfelt and very thoughtful comments. I think at this point in time, we're going to take a 14-minute break, come back here at 11:35, and we will resume, but I think we just need a little bit of break time here. So thank you very much for everyone's attention.